so now I'd like to call the meeting to order. And I have a public statement to read. Any citizen desiring to address the hospital board should turn in a speaker card to the board secretary. If the citizen comment pertains to an item on the agenda today, the comment will be heard early in this meeting. Otherwise, it will be heard towards the end. Speakers are asked to limit their comments to 5 minutes. Vendors, suppliers, and/or persons seeking hospital contracts awarded on a competitive basis are reminded that their ability to address the board may be restricted by the items of the invitation for bid, request for proposal, or other purchasing criteria. Lastly, the board has established a claims adjustment review panel comprised of representatives of the board, the medical staff, administration, and legal counsel to review and negotiate the statement of claims. Accordingly, the board will not entertain comments on or discuss or negotiate claims at this meeting. And now, I would like to approve the orders of the day. Can I have a motion to approve the orders of the day? Can I have a second? All those in favor, say yes. Any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 17th, 2022? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. And now, I'd like to take one item slightly out of order. As you all know, we lost our good friend and colleague, Daryl Henry, in October. Today, we'd like to read a resolution in his honor, and Mark Thornton, who worked very closely with Daryl on the audit committee, is here to accept the board's appreciation and recognition on Daryl's and his family's behalf. And I will present this to Mark right now. Thank you, Mark, for accepting this for Daryl's family. Yes, you can take it. Thank you. And now, I will ask Carol Ann to read the resolution.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a resolution of the Sarasota County Public Hospital Board. Whereas Daryl W. Henry served with distinction and dedication as a member of the Sarasota County Public Hospital Board since 2010, serving for many years as chairman of the audit committee. And whereas Daryl W. Henry is hereby recognized for his business acumen, leadership, and dedication, providing skilled governance during the health system's strategic growth over the years. As a board member, he was known for his zealous advocacy for his beloved Northport neighbors. He was a tireless advocate for the delivery of top quality care to the South County community and was instrumental in our plans to bring the new hospital to the city of Northport. And whereas during his tenure, Sarasota Memorial received numerous honors, including earning a 5-star quality rating from CMS, Magnet redesignation, U.S. News recognition, the Gallup Great Workplace Award, Leapfrog A-grade in patient safety, Proven Top Hospital honors, and many other national awards. And whereas Daryl W. Henry represented the Southern District and played a significant role in shaping the healthcare system's direction since 2010, and worked hard to promote the health and well-being of the community and serve as an advocate for Sarasota Memorial. Now, therefore, be it resolved that although Daryl W. Henry completed his tenure on the board, his colleagues, the organization, and the entire community will long benefit from his exceptional governance and invaluable contributions. Be it further resolved that Daryl W. Henry will be honored for his outstanding leadership, and his name and accomplishments will be set down upon the records of this great healthcare system for all to read for years to come.
Thank you, Carol Ann. And now moving on to the board reports. Do we have a motion regarding the slate of board officers?
On item 7A on our agenda today, we have, I'm sorry, that's the wrong. There we go. We have a report of the governance committee under board reports, item 4A. On the agenda at this time, I'd like to move election of the following slate of officers for the 2022-2023 board year. As chair will be Tram Hudson. As first vice chairman, Brad Baker. Second vice chairman, Victor Rote. As secretary, Bridget Fiorici. As assistant secretary, Sarah Lodge. Treasurer, myself, Greg Carter. And as assistant treasurer will be Patricia Mariah. And that concludes my report.
Well, that requires a second.
And now
Wait.
We need a second and a vote on
we
that?
need a motion in a second.
Okay. I move approval of the election of officers as presented. We have,
Get a motion in a second.
any questions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
And now I want to thank everyone for my year as board member. I was very honored. And I will call this the gavel right now, Mr. Hudson. So I'm passing the gavel on to you. Congratulations to all of our board members.
Thank you, Sharon. I want to acknowledge Sharon's leadership of this board this past year. She has done a commendable job in leading the board. She brought her experience and her knowledge, her expertise as a longtime nursing educator and a leader in the nursing community here in Sarasota County. Her perspective from a nurse brings new valuable insight to our board's deliberations. And she represented our community well on the board. She was first elected in 2016. She oversaw during her tenure as chairman the opening of the Cancer Institute, the Jealous Institute. She oversaw the opening of the Venice Hospital and the groundbreaking of the Cornell Behavioral Pavilion. She is a retired Air Force officer, but if I may use a Navy analogy here, I just want to say that Sharon has had a steady hand on the helm of this ship. She's done a great job. We'll continue to enjoy her service on the board for another 2 years. She's always positive, upbeat, and I look forward to working with her and seeking her valuable counsel. Let's give her a round of applause.
It was my honor, and I love Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and I will continue to be their best supporter for the rest of my life.
All right, thank you, Sharon. Let me address the board, and I also like to invite and welcome the public for this meeting. I've been on the board for almost 8 years. This is the largest crowd I think we've had for a board meeting since 2014. I commend the citizens for coming out to make their opinions known. Let me say to the board and to the public that thank you for allowing me to serve as chairman of Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I'm honored by the trust and confidence that you have placed in me And I have said on many occasions, once I was first elected, that Sarasota Memorial is a real community treasure. Ever since 1921, when a group of citizens came together to raise money to build a hospital in our new community, this hospital has provided healthcare services for this community, starting with a 32-bed hospital, and has now grown to a hospital system with 2 campuses. We have over 8,000 employees and 1,000 beds. It really has grown. Our hospital has been led during that time by a committed group of citizens who have come forward being elected to represent the citizens of our county. And I'm proud to be a part of that tradition as we enter our 98th year of serving the healthcare needs of Sarasota County. As chairman, I pledge to you, the board, my wholehearted effort in working together to build on the success of the hospital system. Now, I want you to know 3 things. First, I want to do what is best for the hospital system. I want to do what is best for the patients that we serve, best for the medical staff, best for the hospital staff, and best for the citizens of Sarasota County who elected us. We may not agree all the time, but I promise to be straightforward, open to debate, conduct our meetings impartially, and allow everyone, both members of the board as well as the public, to voice their opinions with the objective of doing what is best for the hospital system. Second, I want you to know that I'm not out to disrupt the operation of the hospital or this staff. Some have called me a maverick on this board during my tenure because I have been willing to ask hard questions and challenge management to be the best they can be. I've said on many occasions that I think David and the administrative team and the medical staff are doing an outstanding job running this hospital. The proof is in our numbers, and I hope that will continue. I also want to reiterate my commitment for Sarasota Memorial remaining a public hospital. I said that in 2006. I said that in 2016 when I first ran for office. I reaffirmed it when I ran for re-election in 2020. And I stand here today to tell you that we are not selling this hospital. It is a community treasure, and we're not going to screw it up. And third and finally, I want you to know that my goal as chairman is to channel the new energy of the board for the good of the hospital and for the community. And I ask for your help in doing that. Thank you again for the opportunity to serve. So with that, let's get to work. All right. The first order of business on the agenda is, did we approve the minutes? We did.
Medical staff.
I think we'll call on the number 5, the medical staff reports. And Dr. Jim Fiorica, you have the floor.
Yes, I have nothing to report this month. Thank you.
All right. Let me call on the chief of staff, our new chief of staff in Sarasota, Dr. John Hoffberger, for his report.
Thank you. Today I'm seeking a motion approval of the 2022-2023 SMH Sarasota Medical Executive Committee roster, including the medical staff officers and department chairs as elected by the medical staff and recommended by the Medical Executive Committee.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Or
You need a
I need a
motion.
motion. So, is there a second? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Motion passes. Continue, Doctor.
I'm also asking for a motion approving Impella on-call policy, general surgery bariatrics criteria as revised, general surgery single port robotics criteria, and otolaryngology single port robotics criteria for SMH Sarasota, all as recommended by the Medical Executive Committee.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes. Yes. Motion passed. Please continue.
Completed.
I'd like to now call on Dr. Chris Jefferson. Thank you for driving up from Venice, Dr. Jefferson. Dr. Jefferson is the chief of staff of the new Venice Hospital.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I am seeking a motion approval of the 22-23 SMH Venice Medical Executive Committee roster, including the medical staff officers and department chairs as elected by the medical staff and recommended by the Medical Executive Committee.
Is there a motion? All right. And a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes, and the motion passes.
I am also asking for a motion approving the EMTALA on-call policy, the cardiology delineation of privileges, adding lead, explant, and leadless procedures with the micro device for SMH Venice, all as recommended by the SMH Venice Medical Executive Committee, and the amendments to the SMH Venice Medical Staff Bylaws as approved by the SMH Venice General Medical Staff Meeting on 11/7/22 and recommended by the Medical Executive Committee.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say yes. Motion passes. Dr. Jefferson, anything else?
That is it. Thank you, Chairman.
Nice to see you here. Thank you. We'll go to item number 6, the Secretary's report.
The next meeting will be December 19th, 2022. It's a Monday, 10 to 11, the Finance Committee, 11 to noon, Mission and Planning Committee, noon to 12:30, closed session for the hospital board meeting, 12:30 to 2, review of finances, board issues, and board lunch, 2 to 4 is the board meeting.
Any questions of Secretary? Thank you. We'll go to number 7, the Treasurer's report, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Approval of bad debt and charity care. Move approval of the bad debt and charity care for the month ending November 31st, 2022 in the amount of $14,315,000.
Is there a second? Any discussion on the charge-offs being recommended? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Yes. I'm sorry, say yes. And those opposed, motion passed. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Let me call on our new Chief Financial Officer, Jeff Limbacher, to give the financial highlights. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I have a presentation on the screen above. We'll go through real quick. This is October, the first month of our fiscal year. So we won't focus on the year-to-date numbers. They'll be the same as the month since it's the first month. Sorry about that. So the first month of the fiscal year, this is October, this is for the Sarasota system in its entirety. And this is the rating agency format. Our revenues for the month, $132,270,000 versus a budget in the middle column there of $118,497,000. Again, we will not look at the year-to-date numbers on the right because they'll be the same. On the next slide is total expenses for the system in its entirety, $125,369,000 in total expenses for the month of October versus the budget you see in the middle column of $113,395,000. And that leads to an operating income for the health system of right at $7 million for the month versus a budget of $5,102,000 in the middle bar. The operating margin for the month actual was 5.3% versus a budget of the month of 4.3%. Now we'll move into statistics. This is for the hospitals only. Our average daily occupancy for the month of October was 850 versus a budget of 678. You'll see the length of stay at the bottom of the slide. For Sarasota Hospital, we had a length of stay of 4.81, and for Venice, we had a length of stay of 3.94. The bar chart to the right is admissions and observation cases. We had 5,930 cases in the month of October versus a budget of 4,882 cases. Surgery cases for the month of October, again for the hospitals, we had 2,473 cases for the month of October versus our budget of 2,252. The births to the right, we had births of 368 in the month of October versus a budget of 347. Our outpatient registrations, again for the hospitals, 45,614 actual registrations for the month of October versus a budget of 44,815. Our emergency care registrations are to the right, 13,516 versus a budget of 11,620. And then the final slide for my report, the case mix index, the bar charts all the way to the right. This is for the fiscal year, but obviously it's just 1 month. The Sarasota campus's case mix index for all patients was 1.92. The Medicare case mix index was 2.02. The next two bars are for Venice. The all case mix index was 1.49, and the Medicare case mix index was 1.48. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Jeff? If I might just comment for the public that are here with us, I guess, the board meets in committees, and our committees are open to the public. And we usually start about 9 o'clock in the morning. So the board has met with Jeff earlier today, gone over these numbers. So you may not hear questions in this meeting, I think, in the interest of time. But thank you, Jeff, for that. I did want to make that comment. I failed to introduce our board members, and I'd like to just take this opportunity so that the public knows the board members. Greg Carter is a representative from the Southern District. Bridget Farici represents the Central District. Britt Reiner is in her first term. She represents the Central District. Excuse me, at large. You're at large. At large. And Patty Mariah represents the Southern District. And Sharon will continue representing an at-large seat. And next to Vic Brody is a newly elected board member from the Northern District, and Sarah Lodge, next to Vic and Brad, represents the Central District. And finally, Brad Baker was elected this past November, or actually in August, to represent the Northern District. The other folks at the table, if I can just introduce them, Sharon Roush is head of our Venice Hospital. Laurie Lang is president of the Sarasota Campus Hospital. Frank Morgan is the vice president in charge of ambulatory services. I had to learn what that was. It's the ER, mammograms, and our urgent care centers and what have you. And Dr. Jack Rodman is the head of First Physicians Group. I think everybody knows Karen Marshall, the assistant to the board, and the legal counsel for the hospital is Caroline Hayes. So I think I introduced everybody. So let me go to the committee reports, number 9. And since I chaired the governance committee this morning, I'll make that report. As you heard earlier, The governance committee met for over 2 hours this morning. We had a excellent meeting, a lot of good discussion with the new board members and the old board members. We approved the minutes of our previous meeting, and we participated in an icebreaker getting to know you exercise. And we learned a lot of new things about our fellow board members. Next, the committee discussed the board member preferences for their committee assignments and what they wanted to accomplish during their term on the board. And those will be voted on in the December meeting. The next thing we did was to approve our board calendar. And I'd like to now entertain a motion from someone, because I can't make a motion as chair, the approval of the board calendar for the 2023 board as recommended by the Governance Effectiveness Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye or yes. Motion passed. And next, the committee discussed some amendments to the board policies, and we acted on 3 of those and involving travel, strategic planning, and conflicts of interest. And I would entertain a motion to approve those policy updates. And we got a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And let me now call on our president to give the president's report.
That was deferred.
We deferred.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I am going to start, like I do at every meeting, with an organizational report card. I will tell you that we have not, as our board has not yet set the organizational goals for yet. We'll probably do that next month. So we're using the same goals as last year, if you will. We have the 5 different areas of concentration, starting with that in service. We have a goal of having 8 out of our 10 areas having our likelihood of recommending be equal to or greater than the 75th percentile. I'm happy to report we are hitting at 9 out of 10 of those. I'll show you the details on that in a minute. In the people area of focus, our goal is having our new hire retention, a percent of regular full-time and part-time employees that are hired in FY 2022 that are still employed by the end of the year. We had a goal of being at 83%. I'm happy to report that we exceeded that, and we were at 86.35%. Inequality area, we have our goal of having our infection prevention, which is our combined overall standardized infection rate, be less than 0.85. I'm happy to report we're exceeding that as well at 0.76. Just to remind the board and the public that 1.0 would be the expected or the industry average. So we're already setting our goals less than that when we started. In the finance area, you've already heard from our CFO, Jeff Limbacher, on the organization's finance. We would have our goal of having our operating margin be, at our budget, which is for last year was 5.5%. And as you saw from Jeff, we are projecting 5.6% right now. And in the growth areas, we have our strategic growth organizational goals. The first being our inpatient admissions and outpatient observations patients. Having a goal of 60,119. We are projecting to beat that at 63,755. And then finally, in outpatient registrations, our goals is 1.125 million. We have also projected to beat that at 1.144 million. Turning to the next page, and I'll orient you on this, is the patient experience report card, the detail. Left-hand side, you'll find the area, the 10 different areas that we look at from a likelihood of recommending. The middle is our actual score that we received from our patient surveys. The next one over is our national median score. And then finally, the 75th percentile score, which is what we use in our look. Happy to report, as I said a minute ago, 9 out of 10 of our areas are at or above the 75th percentile. The one that came in just short this month was radiation oncology, but still had a mean score at 95, just at 1 score under the median and 2 under the 75th percentile. Next, we continue to look at our straight A and safety street. Sarasota Memorial Hospital received another A in the fall of 2022's hospital safety report cards. That were released by the Leapfrog Group this month, continuing our straight A street since we began participating in this back in 2016. The national honor recognizes our continuous achievements protecting patients from medical errors and preventable harm. The grading system is fully transparent and free to the public, and grades are updated biannually in the fall and in the spring. SMH Venice, which opened in November 2021, has not been open long enough to be included in Leapfrog's current set. SMH also recognized this month for ethical billing practices. Sarasota Memorial Healthcare System was recognized among one of the best hospitals for billing ethics in America in a first ever study published by Money. Money teamed up with Leapfrog Group to share their first ever best hospitals ranking to help consumers make decisions about which institutions not only provide safe, quality care, but are also the most likely to treat people fairly when billing for that care. To be eligible, hospitals had to achieve at least an A or a B grade on the Leapfrog's hospital safety grade assessment for fall of 2022 and meet the following criteria: provide detailed, itemized bills for patients within 30 days of treatment, provide clear instructions on how to contact someone if there's a dispute of charges, and establish a payment plan if needed. And finally, does not take legal action against patients for late or insufficient payment of a medical bill. Cancer Institute adds new therapy. Sarasota Memorial is adding a new cancer-fighting technique, a high-dose brachytherapy, to the advanced treatment options available to Brian D. Jellison Cancer Institute. A highly targeted, highly controlled process allows physicians to individualize treatment plans based on each patient's unique tumor and anatomy while reducing exposure to surrounding healthy tissues and organs. HDR brachytherapy has demonstrated superior outcomes for several types of cancer, including endometrial and prostate cancers. To learn more about HDR brachytherapy, please listen to our current podcast, which is at smh.com podcast. SMH participates in global clinical study. Sarasota Memorial Hospital is among a select group of world-class heart institutions participating in an international clinical trial for the world's first true dual-chamber leadless pacemaker for people with slow and irregular heart rhythms. Just one of 80 research sites globally, SMH's electrophysiology team implanted the device in patients in July and September. All are doing well and will be monitored until the study period ends next year. The pacemaker received FDA approval this spring after a pivotal multi-center trial found it safe and effective for certain patients and with abnormal heart rhythms. Once again, please go to our podcast and listen to Dr. Philip Matthew, as he talks about this. SMH honors physicians and it also installs our new medical staff leaders. The medical staff of SMH Sarasota campus recently honored 2 physicians for outstanding service and installed its new slate of physician leaders for 2022 to 2023. Dr. Herb Silverstein was awarded the 2022 Lifetime Achievement Award, while Dr. Wilhelmina Visa-Ramesh was named the 2022 Physician of the Year. SMH Sarasota Medical Staff also appointed its 2022-2023 officers. In Dr. John Hopper, who's sitting to my left, you've already heard from, is our current Chief of Staff, and Dr. Sarah Temple was appointed Chief of Staff-elect. SMH marks milestones in November. Sarasota Hospital first opened in November 1925 to the left, and the health system recently marked its 97 years of remarkable service and growth, and you can see some of the pictures throughout the years. We did want to take a minute and salute our veterans. Earlier this month, Sarasota Memorial joined the nation in recognizing Veterans Day, a time to honor brave men and women who have answered the call of duty.
Many members of our SMH team have served in the military or active members, and we owe a tremendous amount of gratitude towards them. We also thank the many staff who all have loved ones who are serving. Celebrating those who excel. Earlier this month, Jim Tollerton, a former member of the Sarasota County Public Hospital Board and founder of our Excel program, hosted a special reception to honor Sarasota Memorial's Excel Award winners. Since 1986, the program has honored over 430 standout team members. And finally, launching our video town hall series for staff earlier this month. The first in a new series of quarterly video updates for staff has kicked off, featuring myself answering questions about news and initiatives taking place around the healthcare system. I'd invite everyone to watch that as well. We're still trying to experiment with format and make sure we get as much information disseminated as possible. And that is my report, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members for David? Hearing none, we'll move on to the agenda. I don't believe we have anything on the consent agenda. Do we, Karen? Nothing on the consent agenda. We'll now move to public comments. And if I can just be, I think you heard me in my remarks earlier. I am fully committed to making sure that the opinions of the board members as well as the public to be heard. This is quite a number of folks who have showed up. I have the yellow sheets here with me, and there are approximately 45 people who have signed up to talk. And I would ask that you be concise, be respectful in your comments, state what you want to talk about. And frankly, if there is a repetition of the same thing, I would ask those that I will call later, if it's the same thing. One of the things that happens in a lot of public meetings at the state legislature or the county commission is if you're signed up to speak, but it's already been said, wave your hand to show your support, and we will keep track of that up here. So with that, it's a 5-minute limit. I think we have a microphone at the podium. Is that correct? Peter's going to manage that. Allison's going to manage it. And the first, Caroline, if you'll keep track of the time, I appreciate it. And again, 5 minutes, and look forward to hearing from you. First up, Dr. Stephen Gafanti.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Stephen Gafanti. My specialty was emergency medicine. I caught COVID July 22nd last year. 10 days later, admitted myself to Sarasota Memorial Hospital. My hospitalist told me on admission that I was no longer contagious. When I asked why I was in COVID isolation, he just shrugged his shoulders. I asked a few more questions about his treatment plan and got a similar response. But I was too tired and short of breath to really care. The next day, Keith Kahn became my roommate. Keith was 20 years my younger and a marathon runner. Gradually, I got better and Keith got worse. As I lay in bed, I could hear him struggle to breathe, so I asked him what was going on, and he said he didn't know. I asked him to use his inspirometer 10 times, and his best effort was 1,000 milliliters. I was doing 4,000 at the time. He was not moving enough air to survive much longer. So I asked him if he wanted me to be his patient advocate, and he said yes. He called in the nurse, he has to see his labs. Keith's white count had been high for 4 or 5 days, and his repeat chest x-ray showed a worsening pneumonia. I told the nurse that it looks like Keith had a bacterial pneumonia. Could she please contact his doctor? She said yes, but no doctor ever came. 12 hours later, Keith was on the brink of collapse, drowning in his own pus. I told the night nurse about the pneumonia and again asked for the doctor. Her response was bizarre. She didn't seem to care about Keith. She was alarmed that I knew he was dying from an untreated pneumonia. She refused to tell me or Keith who his doctor was. She refused to listen to the infectious disease doc I got on the phone at 3 a.m. She conferred with the other nurses and they walked out on Keith. So at that point I asked Keith, "Hey Keith, want to be on Facebook?" And he said yes. And this is the man in extremis that they walked out on. They decided I needed to be moved to another room. I told the nurse that wouldn't be necessary. I would leave AMA. At which point they agreed and asked me to lay in bed while they got the necessary paperwork. They then came back with security, attacked me, tied me to my bed, and placed me in isolation for 4 hours. After a change of shift, a doctor came by and released me. 3 weeks later, Keith died. After I was healthy enough, I went to the police with 3 charges, including elder abuse. The police investigated and told me that what happened to me was a common practice at this hospital, and they weren't going to send it to the district attorney. I eventually sent my case to the hospital for review. And Cheryl Roberts, Executive Director of Quality and Risk Management, thought elder abuse was so common at SMH that it wasn't worth commenting on. It seems that those of you who were on the board at that time were unaware of this incident. I would like to ask anyone in the audience who has had a friend or relative mistreated during a COVID stay to please stand. Thank you. It appears that this hospital board is a victim of a cover-up. I request that you form a special committee to investigate what caused this bizarre behavior by your staff.
You have 1 minute remaining.
I can assure you, elder abuse by nurses and security is not taught in nursing school, and doctors don't randomly pick treatments they can't explain. Your investigation should reveal the procedures that allowed these patients to be so poorly treated. And you have nothing to lose. I'm sure that everything is being done is legal. I have searched for over a year for a lawyer to take my case, and none will. The police and the district attorney see no wrongdoing. They don't pay your lawyer, and you don't pay your lawyer $800,000 a year to fail to take full advantage of the law. Whatever the policy or procedure that created these cases is legal, but it is your duty as the board to undo it before more people die due to them. When you review my case, I would like to be present and to ask questions. I'm sure the others who have lost loved ones would want the same.
Thank you, Doctor. The next sheet is Tanya Paris, to be followed by Dr. Sherry Winstead.
Hi, my name is Tanya Perus. I'm the Moms for America Medical Freedom Specialist and the Sarasota County Moms for America President. I am here today to provide information that I personally researched or received from the board certified doctors regarding the treatment, protocols, financial benefits, and standards of care of this hospital and most hospitals across the United States in regards to COVID-19. I have personally received over 100 verbal testimonies of mistreatment or mishandled care by the hands of Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I would like to emphasize that there is a sincere worry and concern by many county citizens of having to come here for their care, regardless of what their health issues are. You may ask yourself, why is there such a concern? Well, let me explain. Through extensive research, testimony from doctors, and hearing stories of patients' family members, it is blatantly obvious that there is a more sinister scheme at hand, and this hospital is one of the countless hospitals to become a victim at the hands of government overreach. Let's start with the PrEP Act, which created Section 319 for COVID-19 in January 2020. The PrEP Act offers immunity to the hospital so long as they are using recommended treatment protocols of the CDC and NIH. Then there's the CARES Act, a wonderful $2.2 trillion economic stimulus bill passed in 2020, providing hospitals with bonus incentive payments for all things related to COVID-19, such as testing, diagnosis, hospital COVID admission, use of remdesivir, ventilators, vaccines, and reporting COVID-19 on death certificates. It is a fact that these hospitals are given incentives and bonuses for each and every COVID PCR test, COVID positive test, COVID patient, COVID treatment, and COVID deaths. Admitting a COVID patient is worth around $13,000. And just by using remdesivir, the hospital receives a bonus of 20% of the entire hospital bill. Mechanical ventilation serves up the hospital another $39,000 payout. Hospitals receive this money in advance based off projections and data. If those funds are not used, they must give back the money. Millions of dollars at stake is like dangling a carrot on a stick. When it's all said and done, the average payment for COVID patients are around $100,000. But each and every COVID patient has the potential to earn the hospital a total of around $500,000. We're talking about millions of dollars revenue for the hospital, which is run by administrators and a board that is not in the trenches with these patients. I have a friend who was admitted this morning to SMH for a parasite and E. coli. He refused a COVID test, and due to that refusal, he was admitted to the COVID floor as a COVID patient. Isn't that something? And then there's been more stories of patients coming to this hospital due to car accidents, cancer, broken legs, and then they're tested and found to be positive and treated for a virus they aren't even showing symptoms for. False positives equal positives, and positives or refusal to test equal COVID patients, and every COVID patient equals money. Remdesivir, a medicine which is part of the hospital COVID protocol, isn't a new drug. It was used in the 2018 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. It was discontinued due to kidney and liver failure and death rate that exceeded 50%, and yet 2020 Fauci directed that this drug was to be the drug hospitals use to treat COVID-19. When patients are prescribed this drug, they don't get better, they get worse. They get organ failure. It leads to mechanical ventilation, all of which have dollar signs attached to them. Venting a patient applies extra pressure on the lungs. If the COVID-19 patient's vented, also has lung issues from COVID, their lungs are not likely to be able to deal with the increased pressure. Chances of that patient recovering at this point are slim to none. The average COVID-19 patient that is vented dies in approximately 4 days. This hospital is the one place where a person should feel safe when they are hurt and sick. They should feel like they are in good care, they're protected here.
You have 1 minute remaining.
And yet instead, it seems to be the one place you should avoid at all costs because your life is not as important as the dollar signs attached to it. What I and so many others would like to know is, was this hospital involved in creating its COVID protocols and its practices to incentivize the amount of money this hospital would make off of its patients? I asked the Sarasota Memorial Hospital Board, which we were very responsible in getting new members elected, to provide us, the citizens of Sarasota County, with complete and utter transparency by initiating a special committee to perform an in-depth and thorough investigation into these egregious findings. We, all of us potential patients of this hospital, hold this board accountable and on notice to do what is right. Thank you.
Dr. Sherry Winston, to be followed by Jenny Nagle.
Hi there, that's a tough act to follow, and I want to start out by thanking all the board members for serving, and new and old board members, thank you for all you do. My name is Dr. Sherry Weinstein. I've been on the SMH staff for over 20 years, and on the QI Quality Improvement Committee for this hospital in internal medicine, or served as chair for that, co-chair for that for 14 years. Prior to this, I practiced in Miami in internal medicine and led clinical research in drug research trials. I have recently given testimonial for the Florida Medical Association regarding COVID treatment, masking, and vaccine mandates. I love SMH. I love this hospital. This is the only hospital that I would ever admit my patients to. Yet, exceedingly, in the past 2 years, I've had patients that have been concerned and they refuse to come to my hospital. This creates a problem for me because I'm unable to take care of my own patients. So I've had some concerns with the standard of care going forward, and I voiced these to leadership at the hospital. I've been in communication with hospital leadership since 2020, and I want to say that I was one of the 2 physicians that looked at the hospital protocols for the PCR tests in the lab. These protocols use cycle thresholds over 35, and that leads to a very high number of false positive tests. These platforms we continue to use, and these are the platforms that result in people being isolated from their families and given experimental drugs. SMH policy was that anyone admitted to the hospital with COVID would be cared for by the hospital-appointed COVID care team. As a concierge doctor, my patients did not want this. They knew that I had been staying ahead of the curve in treating COVID patients since 2020 with FDA-approved drugs and with peer-reviewed protocols with vitamins and supplements. I still have had no fatalities from COVID, over 500 patients treated. Fortunately, I've only had 1 patient that was admitted to SMH who I was admitting for diuresis, yet he ended up on the COVID ward because he swabbed positive for COVID because he had had COVID 6 weeks previously. We all know that you can continue to swab positive for COVID months after an infection. Therefore, this gentleman was an MD, was admitted to the COVID isolation ward, and the COVID infectious disease doctor overrode my decision to let him go home after I diuresed him. This gentleman wanted so badly to be back with his family, he starved himself to death and died 2 weeks later in this hospital of starvation. The hospice doctor put on the top of the death certificate, COVID pneumonia. The family was petrified. They were very upset. They asked me to have this changed. I was unable to get the death certificate changed. This gentleman had completely negative chest x-ray and was on no medications other than his regular at-home drugs. I've had numerous communications with hospital leadership, and Dr. James Fiorica and Joe Seaman, thank you very much for your professionalism and returning my emails. These emails gave specific references to clinical protocols that were peer-reviewed and used around the world to successfully treat COVID-19 patients. Around the world, we're doing better than we are in America, where we're using very expensive, very experimental drugs. When I reached out to Dr. Fiorica, he said I should reach out to the COVID-19 care team, including Dr. Manny Gordia, Dr. Karen Hamad, Dr.
You have 1 minute.
Dr. Rick Brown. I did so with no reply. In the last newsletter, June 4th, 2021 newsletter, I was surprised to see that we're still using hospital protocols that avoid and restrict use of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. And these are FDA-approved drugs that are listed on NIH and WHO website as COVID treatments. They are instead being given molnupiravir, Paxlovid, and other experimental drugs like the remdesivir, which results in 30 to 51% case fatality rate. When asking the COVID infectious disease doctor, he said it works if you use it early. Well, it's an IV drug. You can't use IV drugs early. So I have another issue, the last of which is that we were encouraged, enticed, whatever word you want to use, to get vaccines. Even though we'd had COVID before, hospital staff was encouraged to get vaccines. I would like to see a few areas investigated, and I have a 12-point, actually now it's down to 6-point bullet point of issues. I want to know what the increased mortality at SMHs since vaccine rollout, morbidity and mortality associated with
Dr.
COVID.
Lexi, Thank you very much. Please leave the points that you want to leave with the board secretary, and we will make
And
sure
where
the
is
board
that?
members, well, right here.
Okay,
We'll
thank you,
make sure the board members have copies.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Next one, Jenny Naylor, to be followed by Dr. Ken Hurwitz.
Before I deliver my remarks, I want to share that I boarded a plane at 6:30 this morning from Boston.
Get everybody.
Appreciate it. I boarded a plane at 6:30 this morning from Boston so that I could be here today, and I'm spending about $1,000 for 5 minutes of your time. My father could not be here today to deliver his remarks, so I'm going to deliver both of them, and I hope you'll give your blessing so that I can run over by 1 minute. By way of introduction, my name is Jenny Naylor. The last time I stepped foot in this building was on February 11th, the day my mother passed away on the 10th floor. She was here for vacation and died 12 days after she was admitted. On February 1st, the day after my mother was admitted, her physician told her she was doing well and would likely be here 2 to 3 weeks max. Later that day, my mother was given a drug called Actemra. The day she received it, she was chipper, moving around. She texted me and said she had a good dinner and felt good. 2 days later, her liver started to fail. Coincidentally, Actemra has a black box warning because it can cause liver failure. Fast forward a few days and my mom's stats were getting worse. The nurse noted she thought my mom had congestive heart failure as her lungs were accumulating fluid. 5 days after her admission, she was given remdesivir. 3 days later, her kidneys started to fail. At this point, my mother's lungs could no longer hold oxygen. Antibiotics were administered 7 days after she asked for them. On November 14th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared that hospitals should no longer administer remdesivir regardless of disease severity because it had no mortality reduction and only causes kidney and liver damage. The WHO revisited that decision in May of this year and reconfirmed their stance. France, as a country, stopped using remdesivir because 4 out of 5 patients in their study died after taking it. If it was known around the world that remdesivir does not impact mortality and only causes harm, I need to better understand why my mother received it. My mother's physician was the most compassionate physician we've ever met. When he stood around her and we removed all life-saving measures the day before she died, he cried with her and he cried with us. He was devastated by the fact that she was about to die. I have served on boards and am currently serving on a board. I have a clear understanding of your role and responsibilities. If you vote to launch an investigation, please don't do it for the sake of checking a box. Please do the research and ask the really challenging questions. Legal rights were violated and harmful drugs have been administered. My mother was planning a trip to Europe and was looking forward to spending 3 months in Florida with my father. Now I wear her ashes in a mini urn around my neck. For my mother and for all others who seemingly died as a result of these protocols, I beg you to do your job. Here are my father's remarks. When Andrea was first admitted, she presented with a continuous nagging cough. Her prompt diagnosis and assignment to the COVID-19 ward was not unexpected. I was, however, overwhelmed when told that I would not be allowed to visit her in the hospital, even though the hospital had the airtight safety suit that would have prevented me from inhaling unfiltered air during the visit. I talked with her on the phone for 10 days, and only when her condition was near hospice was I permitted to visit. Visitation should have been allowed days earlier, given the hospital had the necessary protective gear to ensure my safety. When my wife's O2 saturation rate continued to diminish while receiving higher volumes of oxygen at higher purity levels, my request to administer ivermectin was denied because it was not on the list of approved treatments. It was commonly known when Andrea died that ivermectin was not a drug for horses, and in fact had been administered to humans for many years prior to COVID-19. With ivermectin's published track record, there should have been no objection to it being administered. It did not even violate the tenet of do not harm. Your decision to prevent her from trying ivermectin prevents me from even now saying that I did everything I could for her. The hospital didn't even let us try. Even if ivermectin failed to help her, I at least would have had the comfort of knowing that I tried everything I could. At the time, there was considerable controversy on the efficacy of ivermectin as a COVID-19 treatment. There were, however, no published studies saying that it would be contraindicated. What right did Sarasota Memorial have to deny my request? Her outcome could not possibly have been worse as a result of its use. Furthermore, how could harm and use remdesivir when the World Health Organization had flagged it as contraindicated of the harm it does and not allow the use of ivermectin with its harmless track record? To deny a patient of that option is indefensible. The decision should have been left to both the attending physician and consult with the family. Your failure to accommodate family input and instead foster the prevailing opinion that doctors administering such treatments would put their job in jeopardy missed a quantum opportunity to think outside the box, demonstrate heartfelt compassion, and seize the opportunity to gather potentially valuable treatment data. When we were told that Andrea was going on hospice, it was not explained that once she received a drug to keep her comfortable, that she would not regain consciousness again, and that this was the only time I would be able to talk with her before she died. I was devastated to learn this. While I was assured that once Andrea was given the drug that made her unconscious, she would never feel the agony of being unable to breathe, she woke up briefly. Finally, before the process started, while she was awake in her room and while I was
Your
visiting.
time is up and you were given extra time at the chair's request.
Thank you very much, Dean. Dr. Ken Hurwitz, to be followed by Dr. Bidaki. Excuse me.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I am Dr. Kenneth Hurwitz. My background includes an undergraduate degree from Tulane University, medical school at the University of South Florida, and then residency in internal medicine and a fellowship in pulmonary and critical care medicine at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I have been an active member of the medical staff here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital since 2000, and since 2005 have served as the medical director for critical care medicine. First, I would like to extend a welcome to the new members of the hospital board. Welcome back to our returning members. Our medical staff has long enjoyed a good, supportive working relationship with the board. In response to concerns regarding the management of patients with COVID-19 infection at SMH over the past 2.5 years, I would like to provide some background information. We began admitting patients with COVID-19 infection in March of 2020, and through that year, we managed over 300 seriously ill patients in the intensive care unit. Despite the release of COVID vaccines by early 2021, we treated nearly 600 critically ill patients that year. Our worst surge, as many of you know, was in August and September of 2021, with nearly 300 patients alone in those 2 months managed in the ICU. The ICU capability at SMH is robust, but demand far exceeded our previous experience. We have 62 physical ICU beds here. We don't usually fill them all, but at one point, many days over those 2 months, we were managing over 90 ICU patients at a time. Through the resourcefulness of our logistical and clinical staff, we did this by expanding the ICU to other areas of the hospital where the infrastructure was not normally designed for the care of the critically ill. And if not for the foresight of our respiratory therapy leadership, we would have run out of ventilators. Luckily, we had ventilators arriving for the not yet open SMH Venice campus, which we appropriated to the main campus. But even with that, for several weeks, we had to borrow ventilators from the state to meet the local need. We did not have the luxury of expanding our clinical staff to match the demand. Staffing needs around the country were such that physician recruiting was nearly impossible. Many nurses and therapists were lured away by lucrative contracts for temporary traveling jobs in areas of great need. The nurses, therapists, and physicians and support staff all pitched in by working longer hours and extra shifts, and especially before the availability of the vaccines, they did so at great risk, personal risk to themselves and to their families. The administrative leadership of the hospital from the top down was available and supportive of the clinical staff of the hospital, allowed us to practice medicine, and focused on the needs of the community. We learned a lot along the way. Our isolation times and techniques, our use of medications and ventilator management all evolved as good, valid, peer-reviewed research became available. We met regularly with our nursing and respiratory therapy leadership, with our infection control staff, our clinical pharmacists, and physician colleagues from infectious disease and other specialists. We were aided in the evaluation of literature by our academic colleagues from the Florida State University residency program here at SNH. We monitored the national recommendations and we applied those that were appropriate to local use. Our goal has always been to treat patients based on up-to-date, respected, published, peer-reviewed, evidence-based medicine. We also learned a lot about caring for patients and their families. We learned that it hurts to work our hardest and still see otherwise young, healthy patients die from an infectious disease. We learned that separating families from their critically ill loved ones creates great stress and anxiety among those families, as well as for the staff caring for them. We learned that the Delta variant was much more deadly than Omicron, and we learned that vaccines work to help prevent death and serious illness from COVID. The efforts of the staff of this hospital during the COVID crisis were nothing short of heroic. I'm extremely proud of the staff and my colleagues who have helped meet the needs of the community.
1 minute.
I understand the desire to look back and evaluate our response to the crisis, and I certainly support the concept of continuous quality improvement, but I can only hope that any inquiry in that regard takes into context the knowledge and the demands of the situation at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's not more. Thank you, Doc. Thank you. Dr. Gadecki, to be followed by Dr. Jeffrey Sell.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Gedeke. I'm a pulmonary critical care physician here at Sarasota Memorial Healthcare System. I was asked to give a brief description of what it was like to care for patients with COVID-19 during the Delta wave. I have to be honest, the moment the text came through asking me to speak, I had somewhat of a visceral response come over me as I brought me back to where we were as a nation at that time. It was not so long ago that I made the decision to dedicate my life to practice medicine. Ultimately, I chose pulmonary critical care because I wanted to take care of truly sick people. I can tell you without a doubt that I never imagined this type of sick when I embarked on my career. I had some pictures, but I'll spare us the pictures of our faces as we cared for these patients. But sometimes I say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I took these pictures for myself, for my personal journey, because of the toll it's taken on our healthcare workers. I knew it would take some healing after this pandemic did her best. So the first picture I took was me and my capper, and I was during the first wave of this pandemic, and I will be forever grateful to Sarasota Memorial Healthcare System for providing us with the personal protective equipment that we needed to fight this good fight. The sad truth is that throughout the nation, there are many pulmonary critical care physicians and many people in the healthcare field that lost their life fighting this good fight. There was a second picture that showed a smile. It showed a sticker on my chest that said I got the vaccine. But then the Delta wave arrived, and I saw sick in exponential speed. See, now this wave, it was different. We now knew how destructive and how deadly this virus truly was, and the Delta then came with an experienced heartache. I saw fear in people's eyes like I've never seen before. I saw courage in people's eyes like I've never seen before. These patients, they were our police officers. They were our teachers. They were our grocery store workers. They were our neighbors and they were our family. They were Sarasota. Imagine a mother just gave birth. She then hands her daughter over to the pediatric care team. Daughter goes to the neonatal intensive care unit. She says goodbye to the child and ultimately comes to our intensive care unit to fight for her own life. Fight for her own life on a ventilator while sedated, while paralyzed, while laying on her belly, the belly that just carried new life onto this earth. Fighting for her life with machines breathing for her and life support helping to beat her heart. Imagine that police officer, the police officer that risked his life to save yours. Now he loses his life to COVID-19. Now the Delta wave, it was many loved ones praying for a miracle. But the Delta wave also took its toll on healthcare workers. It was about that time that we went from courageous, good people to some of the worst enemies in the American people's eyes. During the Delta wave, healthcare workers had to fight harder than ever for our patients, as the number of patients filling up our hospital was overflowing. As physicians, we want to be a vessel for healing. Imagine being a physician caring for an ICU full of patients. Say you have 10 beds in that ICU. Say they're all intubated from COVID-19. Know that statistically speaking, 3 of these 10 patients will survive, coming to work every day,
You have 1 minute.
knowing what you're dealing with. So quickly in summary, I'll just take you down to days of coding and dying of multiple patients on the same day. I'll take you down to this moment that, we were unable to have family members in the building because of how dire straight things were. There came a time wearing a capper that the capper wasn't enough, wearing a N95 glasses, because every single time I intubated a patient, I cried because I knew what that meant. We did not want our patients to have to progress to a ventilator, but when they needed it and when they did, we knew what that meant. So the story goes a little something like this. As their family is on FaceTime, the nurse is beside me, the respiratory therapist is beside me. I say to the patient, I'm going to make you comfortable so that you're not working so hard to breathe, and I'm going to give your organs an attempt to give you oxygen, intubate them, and the rest is history. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I know that y'all are enthusiastic. I can tell by the applause, but in the interest of time, if you would please refrain from doing that. Dr. Jeffrey Sell, followed by Dr. Richard Lichtenstein.
So cancel the applauses, it's my turn.
Okay.
I'm Dr. Jeffrey Sell. I'm the chief of cardiothoracic surgery here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I've been here for 8 years. After graduating from Yale, I trained at Harvard Medical School in a joint program with MIT, holding an MD degree from both institutions. I had then gone on to training at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Boston Children's Hospital. And during that time, I also spent 2 years as a fellow at the NIH, during which I actually had the opportunity to care for some patients with a brilliant young physician named Anthony Fauci. I then went on to practice cardiac surgery and came here, and I'm currently the chief of cardiothoracic surgery. Also, I'm a clinical assistant professor, Department of Surgery at Columbia University. My sense of COVID was a little different in that I was more in an observing position because we did not care for cardiac surgery patients with COVID, except in very few circumstances where it was almost universally fatal. We tried to avoid patients with COVID, and we counted on our critical care partners to help us with the care. I've recently been listening to a podcast about something called Red Flag. Many people don't know what Red Flag is. Red Flag is the Air Force's version of Top Gun. Red Flag was devised because during the Vietnam War, the U.S. Air Force did not know how to conduct integrated force activities. We came with a perfect model of that in our care of COVID. Very early on, before we even knew this was going to be as bad a problem as it was, we developed a joint task force that was headed by people
in all areas. And we were able to cross over to different specialties and to see how it impacted different specialties. In addition, all of us had on our phone the ability to look at protocols from the NIH, from CDC, WHO, as well as the Brigham and Women's experience, which I consulted often. We also spoke to our colleagues at Columbia. The first round of COVID at Columbia was a nightmare. They found themselves with regular operating rooms converted to 4-bed ICUs, canceling entire surgical schedules just to care for dying patients. The cardiac surgery residents, instead of practicing cardiac surgery, became a team performing tracheostomies from bed to bed to bed. This was a disaster. This was a nightmare. None of us learned about it in medical school. None of us expected. And it changed as it went. We know that the first round, the early round, was very different from the Delta round. That hit us very hard last summer in August. We rallied to that cause. I wrote a letter to our staff every week telling them how good a job they were doing and what we were doing. We took our program, our cardiac surgical patients, to a different unit. We cared for them in a recovery room rather than in an ICU. But through this, because we had the passports, because we knew what resources we had, we were able to continue taking care of cardiac surgical patients here, unlike at Columbia. We're able to continue to function as a strong hospital, despite being overwhelmed, as Heidi mentioned, by patients that were desperately ill, incredibly sick, with an illness that was changing as we watched it. So I would like to say that we did an incredible job on a lot of levels, much like the training of a red flag program, to take care of a disease that none of us knew, none of us had expected, that changed as we watched it, that hampered our ability to do what we did every day. And yet we all came to work, we all faced each other, we all took risks, which we knew. And I will say one thing, I remember the day I came out of the operating room with a fever. And I thought for sure that I was probably coming down with COVID. And I did not know whether that night I would be finding myself in a bed, starting on medication, maybe on a ventilator, maybe never see my wife again. But I came back to work after I cleared the fever. Thank God it wasn't COVID, and went on from there. So we have a lot ahead of us. As cardiac surgeons, we look carefully at everything we do. We have something called an SDS database, which means every case we do, we know how it should turn out, and we look at what we did right and what we did wrong. And that's the future of what we will do here at Sarasota Memorial, with the care we gave for COVID and the care we give for everything else in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sam.
Next, Dr. Richard Lichtenstein. And on deck is Dr. Karen Hammond. I'm sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. My name is Dr. Richard Lichtenstein. I was born in this hospital and have been a lifelong resident of Sarasota County. I left and did my training in St. Louis, New Orleans, Tampa, and Philadelphia, and returned to Sarasota, where I've been actively practicing medicine since 1993. During my tenure at SMH, I've served as the QI Committee Chair, Medical Director of the Department, and Chair of the Department of Radiology, and then I have served as Chief of Staff. Each of these positions required me to acquire new skill sets to deal with issues and challenges, and I had to learn to adapt to changing behaviors and workflows. As a radiologist, I have somewhat of a different outlook on the practice of medicine than many of the other physicians that will speak today. Most physicians look at their patients. Radiologists look into their patients. Most physicians speak with their patients, but for me as a radiologist, the patient's images, the chest x-rays, the CT scans, they are what speak to me. As most patients with COVID present with respiratory symptoms, chest x-rays, supplemented with CT scanning, became the de facto first-line test for COVID infection prior to the dissemination of rapid viral testing. In the first year of the pandemic, more than 2,000 articles were published in the radiology literature alone. with new lexicons developed for the description of findings of COVID, with strategies to rank findings as highly probable, or possible atypical COVID infection. By last summer, 4,862 articles on pulmonary manifestations of COVID have been published in the radiology literature alone. And that tally only pertains to articles concerning the pulmonary or lung manifestations of COVID. As vascular and neurologic manifestations of COVID infection, including but not limited to cerebral venous thrombosis and COVID brain fog, have been identified, thousands of more peer-reviewed articles have been published in our literature alone. Not only me, but all of our radiologists have had a crash course in learning how to diagnose COVID and its attendant complications. We have had to all learn about a new disease. Early publications set us out on our course, but over the past 2.5 years, we've been able to refine our imaging protocols and examinations. As new knowledge arrives and as larger population cohorts are studied, we've been able to integrate evidence-based studies, trials, and findings to improve our abilities to diagnose COVID and its complications. When I was approached about being nominated for the Chief of Staff position, it was prior to even the first reports of SARS-CoV-19. The medical staff leadership, Drs. Alyssa Schulman and Jack Wazin, during 2020 and 2021 were exceptional leaders. I want you to be aware that the medical staff leadership, including the Chiefs Council and the COVID Task Force, met on a regular weekly basis and early on and during the surge, met frequently on a daily basis and multiple times during the day to deal with each new issue and permutation. Not only the medical issues of the patients, but issues of supply chain, issues of staffing, and issues of ensuring that we had adequate tools for the physicians, the nurses, and the other members of the staff to perform their jobs. Many tough decisions were made in order to deal with the overwhelming demands of the provision of care, including but not limited to greater than 120 patients on ventilators, full ICUs, the closure of nursing home admissions, cancellation of elective surgical cases because of the COVID number, and staff shortages due to community-acquired COVID infection in employees.
You have 1 minute.
My success as chief was only due to the incredible talent, diligence, and hard work of those who preceded me. At the same time we were learning how to treat a new disease, each of us was also dealing with the personal and familial issues of working in a facility, treating a large number of infectious patients with a serious and deadly disease with no treatment or cure in the first few months. And other speakers earlier today have specifically spoken about how this should be a safe place. Nobody has mentioned that it needs to be safe for the employees, the staff, and the physicians. Although some of our work may be performed remotely, we walked into work at SMH every day and cared for the patients of the system, regardless of their diagnosis, with grace and with dignity. My colleagues and I then went home and hoped and prayed that we would not impact our own children, spouses, parents, and loved ones. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Karen Hammond. To be followed by Dr. Brad Kaplan.
Thank you. First, I'd like to give my sincere apology to anyone in this auditorium who has lost anyone to this awful disease. It's been a difficult 3 years for all of us. My name is Karen Hammond, and I'm a double board certified internal medicine and pediatrics physician. I have practiced in the community of Sarasota for the last 20 years. I served as chief of staff at Sarasota Memorial Hospital during the years of 2015 to 2017. I have also served on the medical executive committee for the past 5 years and am the head of the general internal medicine department. I was the founding associate program director for the Florida State University Sarasota Memorial Hospital Internal Medicine Residency Program and am now the program director. I have also served as the chairperson of the Sarasota Memorial Hospital COVID-19 Treatment Task Force since March 2020. In early March 2020, I was approached by the SMH hospitalists to coordinate our academic and clinical research and treatment efforts on COVID-19, as our COVID cases were increasing at an alarming rate. Given the unprecedented nature of the emerging COVID pandemic, we felt that it was critical to develop a well-researched, coordinated, and unified path forward. In building our treatment task force, we recruited medical leaders in all specialty fields relevant to COVID, including infectious disease, pulmonary critical care, internal medicine, hospitalists, emergency medicine, pharmacy, nursing, medical education, and research. Faced with a deadly novel virus, we have always felt deeply committed to identifying and providing the best care possible for our community. This was a truly frightening and dangerous situation for us all, and it took courage and selflessness on all of our parts. Our mission was to review all the available emerging evidence-based scientific literature in real time, to evaluate and discuss as a group of leaders at our local institution, and to come up with the preliminary conclusions and recommendations of the best treatment plans for emerging scenarios pertaining to COVID-19 in real time. Everyone on the committee volunteered their time and their resources freely without hesitation in the hopes of providing the best possible medical care for the patients at SMH. In early April, the self-governing medical staff voted through the Medical Executive Committee to have this standardized process instituting emergency guidelines to streamline the care for COVID-19 patients by designating specified specialists and hospitalists to be the COVID-19 treating physicians in order to maintain our commitment to the highest level of patient care. We began meeting virtually by the third week of March, having reviewed and evaluated all of the limited articles we could find from across the worldwide medical literature base. These articles were then presented to the greater group and discussed at length. The validity of each study was assessed using well-established standard evidence-based guidelines and criteria. The implications of each study reviewed were carefully determined with regards to our own clinical experience and patient base. Meetings were held weekly for the first 6 months and then bi-weekly for the next 12 to 15 months. Topics covered ranged from therapeutics, including antivirals, monoclonal antibodies, anti-inflammatories, chemotherapeutics, anticoagulation standards, ventilation methods, telemedicine options, PPE variations, and more. Every decision that the committee made based on their scientific review was then sent to the hospital P&T committee for further evaluation and a vote according to the bylaws of the Sarasota Memorial Hospital medical staff. Those treatment plans were then implemented and reevaluated regularly. As the science and literature evolved, so did our decision-making and our protocols. And no evidence-based treatment plans or protocols were ignored or rejected by the task force. As the Delta wave overtook Sarasota County, the COVID-19 numbers at SMH reached record numbers. Okay. Stretching all of our resources, including personnel, bed space, therapeutics, and ventilators. An emergency scarce resource committee was formed in the event that the number of COVID cases exceeded hospital resources. Thankfully, our high level of care and successful treatment protocols turned the tide before action from this committee was required. I am proud of the rigorous and professional work of the COVID-19 treatment task force, and even more proud of all the SMH medical staff members. As I'm sure you're all aware, Sarasota Memorial Hospital was even awarded a top 40 teaching hospital award based on our COVID-19 outcomes, and we were recently published in CHEST describing our scholarly contribution to the work of COVID-19. In closing, as physicians and medical professionals, we are all here to heal and serve, and every member of the Sarasota Memorial Medical staff stepped bravely into the line of a deadly and unknown virus, risking our own personal health and well-being and that of our families to care for each and every one of the COVID patients that came through our doors using the best possible medical treatment available. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Brad Kaplan. I'm an internal medicine hospitalist with First Physicians Group. I've been with the hospital for 10 plus years. I completed my undergraduate studies at the University of Florida. I completed medical school at Salem University and finished my residency at Norwalk Hospital. I served on the COVID team and was chairman of the Department of Medicine at the height of the pandemic. COVID has changed all of us. It has changed us individually in different ways, but it has not spared one soul on this planet from its impact. In some ways, COVID has made us better. We've learned to do more with less, come together as a team, family, hospital, state, country, and planet. We've developed new research and treatment protocols. It has also divided us. Vaccination, isolation, shutdown, treatment protocols, and death. We did not train or learn about COVID in medical school or residency. In 2019, we had little to no knowledge of the virology, transmission, or treatment of this elusive virus. All we knew was it was deadly. Reports from China and New York of hospitals quarantined, massive deaths of death and mortality to the extent that refrigerated trucks were brought in to serve as temporary morgue. Research was fierce but couldn't happen fast enough. We did our best to follow evidence-based medicine, but the data was quite confusing and contradictory at times. It felt like the data was changing weekly. We had monthly meetings to ensure we were providing the highest quality, evidence-based care to our patients and to ensure the safety of our staff and patients. We all fought valiantly to battle this deadly virus, not knowing if our PPE would protect us or our families from its wrath. Nurses, respiratory therapists, nursing assistants, housekeeping, nutrition techs, administration, and physicians all came together like an army going to battle. I was empowered by these selfless and tireless efforts I observed day in and day out. I will never forget the fear in the eyes of my patient as I told them they were COVID positive. Doctor, am I going to die? Trying my best to reassure patients when I was completely unsure myself. Then, in the summer of 2021, the floor dropped out. Delta variant. Most viruses become weaker as they mutate, but not this virus. It became stronger and more transmissible. The scariest time of my life and my career. Delta spared no one, including young, healthy patients. I saw patients, even in their 30s and 40s, regularly decompensate, require mechanical ventilation, and perish. There were regular calls to my pulmonary critical care colleagues for decompensating patients. To add to this, we were running out of vital equipment, including ventilators and high flow oxygen, despite tireless management and supply chain support. We lost many and still suffer today with long-lasting effects of this virus. I truly feel we did best we could with limited knowledge at the time. The virus has changed greatly since the summer of 2021. It is weakening greatly, and we now walk around in public maskless, relatively carefree. But let us not forget how we walked around masked and in fear of this invisible enemy from 2019 to 2021. More importantly, let us not forget the millions we have lost and continue to suffer this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gwen McKenzie, followed by Steve Hughes.
Good afternoon. I do also want to start by thanking you for your service. Most of the members of the public don't know that you do this in an uncompensated fashion, and you spend many, many hours laboring over the management and oversight, which is your role of governance of this health system. So thank you for what you do. I want to take a pause, not to diminish or take away from, by the way, my name is Gwen McKenzie. I'm a 30-year healthcare CEO, and I was CEO here for 9+ years. It was a pleasure to serve this community. My husband and I have come back to Sarasota and are now permanent residents. So we care very much about what happens to this healthcare institution. I also serve on the Healthcare Foundation Board. We have several board members here today. Our role is to raise funds for the programs and services of Sarasota Memorial. The pause that I want to take, I passed out a chart to the board members. I think there's enough for all the board members. It's really two topics. One is, what is the oversight for quality and safety? That's a topic we're talking about right now today, with many heart-wrenching stories from our families and also from our medical staff. But I want to take us up to the level of what it takes to oversee quality and safety and the regulatory environment that we as a healthcare system and the 5,000 hospitals across the United States are all regulated in the same fashion. So on the chart, you see 50 plus organizations. The most prominent that you would recognize are probably the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, which regulates the United States hospitals. But there are 50 organizations on this chart, all of whom have a responsibility to every single one of those 5,000 hospitals for the oversight of quality and safety and what happens in those institutions. So this is not an unregulated environment. This is a highly regulated environment. I think what you can discern from what the medical staff has shared with you is there is tremendous oversight, not just at the federal level. There's a whole level of state organizations that oversee quality and safety. And in that oversight, David has already mentioned in his report and other reports that you've heard, the accolades that we receive as a community organization for the quality and safety of this institution, from Leapfrog to health grades to U.S. News and World Report. We could go on and on. But I want to assure you, mostly the members of the community that might be watching today, that we do have oversight, and it's rigorous. And to deviate from that oversight has both intended and unintended consequences. So I'd like to address the intended first. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid made it very clear what their policies are, and were accredited according to those policies through the Joint Commission. In addition, around COVID-19, they also made it very clear what the policies are. And they made it clear to all the hospitals in the United States that if vaccination wasn't a part of their policy, the hospitals would not be reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid. Now, you may think that that's inconsequential, but that's probably 70% of the reimbursement of this organization. So we wouldn't be able to care for the community the way we do today. That's intended. The unintended, which I'll finish with, is as I feel behind me, all of the people in scrubs and white coats, I have a concern about what the process is and what the evaluation might be. And I urge you to do it with due process and careful attention to detail. Because we have a job in the recruitment of medical professionals and all kinds of other professionals to serve the community. If they feel concern, and I feel the concern because they're here today, then they will act accordingly, and it will be insidious and quiet, but they will leave. And we'll be left with a bigger labor crisis than we have today. So please, please be very careful in your attention and your oversight, because there are many, many unintended consequences that we haven't talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Hughes, followed by Dr. Sarah Temple.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Hughes and my wife, Lila. I want to thank the board for letting us have just a couple of minutes here. We'll be brief. I'm going to let Lila start this because she was my caregiver. I was the patient, darn near died, but I'll let her review that, and I have a closing comment.
We came here today to thank the people on 10 East, which was the unit
that Steve spent a lot of time in. We have no notes, we don't have any, we didn't prepare any statement, but we felt compelled to say something. Steve represents the people that survived this awful disease. He went into the hospital in March 20th of 2020, early on. He was put on a ventilator right away. He spent 102 days in this hospital. I think he probably is the longest surviving person to spend in maybe any hospital in this country. I was not allowed to come see him. The staff here at this hospital called me every day. We FaceTimed, even though he was on paralytic drugs and heavy sedation. He was on a ventilator. I'm thinking it was 60 days, and from the ventilator, he had a tracheostomy. He was not able to breathe room air until 2 weeks before he left this hospital. They called me, they walked me through everything that was being done with him. Steve received a Mectra. Steve was the first person to receive remdesivir on the west coast of Florida. They told me it could affect his kidneys, and he did have to undergo dialysis, but temporarily. It was just an acute condition. The staff members at this hospital were wonderful. Some of the nurses accompanied him to have his lungs drained. He was not even able to sit up for the procedure, and they had this full body weight on their shoulders for 20 minutes, enough time to drain his lungs. He suffered one infection after another after he was released from the COVID unit. And I was even asked if I wanted to take him off the ventilator when he was on it. And I said, he's 77 years old. He's been on sedative drugs. He's been on paralytic drugs for a very long time. And I just didn't think, I think he needed the time to recover and to come through. Anyway, we're here today, 102 days, and he's just fine, and I'm very, very thankful to everyone at this hospital.
The thing that impresses me and did impress me then was how well organized the hospital was. From the president down to the lowest person here, that guy that just joined, the nurse that just joined the hospital the day before, all pitched in and did a great job. I'm very, very proud of that. And I think as I see some of this divisiveness, different opinions, it's so important to emphasize this is a team that needs to go forward, not backward. And I hope you all will, maybe everybody will come down, look at all the work that's being done, take each other seriously in your opinions, and move forward together to really save people, make the hospital grow, and maintain the goodness and the reputation that it has. Thank you all very much.
Dr. Temple to be followed by Dr. Chuck Pugh.
Good afternoon, esteemed hospital board members, colleagues, and members of the public. Thank you for allowing me to take a few minutes of your time today. My name is Sarah Temple, and I've worked as an emergency physician here for about 10 years. I went to college at the University of Kansas, medical school at Johns Hopkins University, and I did my residency training in emergency medicine at Tampa General Hospital. I want to speak for just a few minutes about my experience as an emergency physician working throughout this pandemic. To do the kind of work that we in the emergency department do, we have to be the person that runs toward disaster rather than runs away. My colleagues in the emergency department, the nurses, techs, and physicians that I work with, they are those people. When the COVID pandemic struck in March of 2020, I remember the fear and the uncertainty. We did not know how deadly this virus was. We didn't know how it was transmitted, and we didn't know how to keep ourselves safe. We didn't know if we might accidentally bring it home to our families, causing them to become ill or even die. People were scared. Yet everyone I worked with continued to do their job, unfailingly putting everything they had into caring for some of the sickest people we'd ever seen in our careers. I vividly recall a young man who was brought by private vehicle to the emergency department. He was not breathing in the car when he arrived. Heedless of any risk to themselves, our nurses and techs extricated this patient and rushed him back to the resuscitation bay where we tried to save his life. We had to constantly remind each other to take time to don even the most basic of protective gear, because our instinct is to jump in and care for people that are so obviously in distress. The initial COVID surge was a strange time to work in the emergency department. While there were areas of the country that were truly overwhelmed and in crisis mode, in our department and in many others, we saw a dramatic decline in the number of patients we saw overall. While we were seeing some truly sick COVID patients, the rest of our patients seemed to disappear. Emergency departments, techs, nurses, and doctors across the country were actually furloughed or even let go during this time because there just weren't enough patients to see. Things seemed to get better when the vaccines came out. We felt safer at work, and it seemed like as a country, we were going to get through this pandemic. And then the Delta surge struck. I've never worked through anything like it, and I hope to never again. As you might imagine, in the emergency department, we are used to sick patients. We deal with critically ill and dying patients as part of our job, and we all have to learn how to deal with death. But the number of incredibly sick and dying patients that we saw on a daily basis was soul crushing. I will not forget looking into the eyes of patients and seeing their fear. This has been mentioned, but it's so memorable. And seeing their acknowledgement of what we both knew, that they were dying. Doctors want to help people. That is the reason we all do this. We want to be able to save our patients. Despite our most heroic efforts, weekly meetings where we scoured the newest evidence and looked for things that would actually work, the incredible teamwork, dedication, and hard work that I saw from my colleagues throughout the hospital, we just couldn't save so many of our patients. Coming back day after day, knowing what we had to do, it was hard, and yet we did it. All of us at Sarasota Memorial Hospital worked harder and longer hours than we ever had before. We watched as our intensive care unit grew to many floors of the hospital. We watched as we ran out of equipment, nurses, and space. We watched as our colleagues and friends got sick, leaving us even more short-staffed. We watched as other sick patients waited to be seen and couldn't receive needed care because our hospital was stretched to its limit caring for COVID patients. We continued to care for people, knowing that many of our patients had vocally maligned healthcare workers because of their beliefs about COVID masks and vaccines, because that is what we do. We come to work when most people are home asleep. We come to work when others are home celebrating holidays with their families. We come to work when we are scared, morally injured, exhausted, or sick ourselves. We come to work when protesters bar our path and question our motives. We do this incredibly difficult job because we want to care for others. Anybody who comes through our doors becomes our patient, and we will do anything in our power to help them. And that will never change. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Chuck Pugh, followed by Dr. Ruben Holland.
My name is Dr. Chuck Pugh. I'm a pulmonary and critical care physician here at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I trained at Temple University Medical School, did my residency and fellowship at Ohio State University, had faculty positions at the University of North Carolina, back to Ohio State, and then Ohio University before I came here. I give you that information because I want you to understand that my career has been about medical education and quality of care. I've chaired quality of care committees, peer review committees throughout my career. That's been the focus of my career. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all the sheets because much of what I said has already been expressed by my colleagues. One thing that I want to assure the board and the members of the community that are here is that I don't work for the hospital. I'm a physician. I work for my patients. Any decision that I ever made to put a patient on a ventilator or to prescribe a medicine is because we truly believe that was the right thing to do to try to save their life. I'm nearly in tears as I talk today because I have to admit, I have PTSD from taking care of COVID patients. I'm broken. I'm trying to recover from it. I'm working through it. So are many of my colleagues. You're going to be losing a lot of staff over the years to come because they are broken and they're trying to figure out how to get through this. I can assure you, again, that we all participate in decisions looking out for the best interests of our patients, and we will continue to do that moving forward. Thank you.
Dr. Ruben Collins, followed by Dr. Jack Wazen.
Heard two patient stories and everybody else is
Thank you for your input. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll shuffle the cards. Dr. Rubin, you have the floor. Order, please.
Thank you very much. I won't repeat a lot of the things that my colleagues said before me. I'm celebrating my 32nd year at Sarasota Memorial. I've chosen to have every procedure I've ever had done at Sarasota Memorial, as well as fly my parents down to Sarasota Memorial to have everything they need done. I've been the chief of staff for 2006, 2007, 2008, and I've been the medical director of the emergency department for the past 12 years. I have over 50 colleagues, both physicians, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners that work in the emergency department. I've seen patients that have been sick, colleagues that have been sick, and both that have died, all from COVID. It's been an extremely stressful experience, probably the most stressful experience in my personal and professional career. Every day when I see patients in the emergency department, I wouldn't say every day, but frequently, we have differences of opinion. I think the person needs antibiotics, the person doesn't think they need antibiotics. I think the person needs to be admitted, they think they need to go home. We try to take care of those issues in a non-judgmental way and not classify the person as right or wrong. They have a difference of opinion. It doesn't make them necessarily a bad person. It doesn't make me a bad person. We have different perspectives. We agree to disagree. And that may be what some of this is, agree to disagree. Because I'm not sure that I can change anybody's mind or their perspective on what they think the right treatment would have been, the right management would have been. But I have to do what's best in my mind. Every committee I've been on, every committee I've chaired, we talk about being a patient-centered, patient-centric, patient-focused approach. And that's the way we practice medicine, is think about our patients first. It's just extremely distressing to me that anybody would think that we do anything different than think about our patients. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I call Dr. Wazen, and I have since shuffled the deck, so it'll be sort of potluck. Dr. Wazen. Wazen, excuse me, I am so sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Jack Wazen. I'm the medical director of otolaryngology at First Physician Group. I joined SMH in 2006. I came from New York, where I was a full-time professor at Columbia. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to come and join the staff and faculty of this hospital. I've served as the chief of staff, and I have attended many board meetings. I know a lot of you, and I welcome and thank the newcomers for your work. A lot has been said. So I don't want to be repetitive, but I want to also remind everyone of the Hippocratic oath that we all swore at the completion of our medical school. In first, do no harm. And everybody talked about the importance of the patient as the center of our life, and it is all true. This is not figment of people's imagination. Patient care is why we went into medical school. Patient care is what we practice. Patient care and the ultimate benefit of the patient is what we focus on. I welcome any investigation that you folks want to do. And I think transparency is important. I think an investigation, if you wish, if the board wishes, is a valid request, because I have no doubt that the results are going to be reassuring for everyone. I have never in my career here, as a medical director or as chief of staff, or whatever role I have served, been told by administration or by any superior about how I need to treat my patient. Their monetary goals have never been the center of our attention. It's been the benefit of the patient based on the knowledge at the time. And at the time, we were all ignorant. We were ignorant of how to treat COVID. We learned on the job because there was no such a thing before 2019. So I thank the board for your oversight, for your support of all the medical staff, and I wish that at some point we will both all be at peace, knowing that the goal of this hospital and its medical staff is for the best care of the patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. I want to ask Jennifer Dale to be followed by Michelle Ozzie. And I apologize if I mispronounced the names.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my experience. And this is a little different because my experience happened not during the very worst throes of COVID, but it starts on September 14th, 2021, near the end of the Delta variant, where my husband, Randy Rousey, who was a lively, fun, and energetic 47-year-old man, went into Sarasota Memorial complaining of abdominal distress. While performing exploratory surgery, the surgeon diagnosed him with stage 4 cancer. So this was during the middle of the initial COVID, but no one was allowed in the hospital. He was discharged on September 21st. 3 weeks later, PET scan and CT scan, the normal test for cancer, came with no definitive cancer. There had been no treatment during this time. After 12 weeks of chemo, another PET scan was performed on December 28th with the conclusion of NED, no evidence of disease. On February 20th, 2022, Randy was readmitted for abdominal pain. He had a CT scan that showed no cancer and no blockage. He had a procedure to drain liquid from around his abdomen. We were supposed to have results in 24 hours. 6 days later, they came back to us and an entire team of pathologists could not diagnose it as cancerous, simply as irregular. There were 3 things that happened continuously through the next 2 months where Randy was at SMH. Number 1 was a continuous refusal to review the original diagnosis and consider any other possibilities. Number 2 was continuously shifting blame and getting mad at us, the patient, for asking for more information or for proof, instead of answering the questions or simply saying that they didn't know, which would have been better than refusing to answer in the first place. And number 3 was a continual pattern of medical mistakes, missing notes in his file and just recopying the original diagnosis, even when it was 8 months out of date and we had over 10 CT scans read by multiple people indicating no signs of cancer or blockage. 24 hours after Dr. Ming, who was great, did a battery of tests for cancer with no conclusive results, another oncologist walked into Randy's room and said, "You have cancer, there's nothing we can do." Randy asked him to prove it, and his words were, "I've never in 30 years been asked to prove that it's cancer," and then walked out. 2 weeks later, after Randy was admitted in 2022, he was preparing to be discharged and his liver enzymes came back as high. This is important because his dad died of liver failure. We offered this information to every single attending and no one would listen to us. The PA said it was cancer. They did a procedure and found that his liver had a massive infection, so bad that pus was spraying out of the wounds and all over the floor. 2 weeks of ignoring this infection. So they inserted a stent. 2 weeks later, Randy is complaining of pain again. The PA says it's cancer. We cannot get a GI doctor ever to come into the room and speak to us. They do a scan and find out that the stent has slipped. So they had to remove the first stent and insert another. Another 2 weeks of ignoring signs of infection and continuing issues. Also, over 2 hours of waiting for pain medication. Not because he had everything that he could have, but because the nurses couldn't get around to it. In an oncology ward that was obviously not full. When a CT scan does show a blockage, Dr. Marino, an assistant surgeon, comes down to talk to us. What's the blockage? He says it's cancer. Can you prove it? His exact words, I was in the original surgery and it's cancer. I'm telling you to get your affairs in order because in 4 to 5 months, you're gonna die. These words were delivered in a shout. In what world does appropriate patient care mean yelling at a patient who is simply asking for more information? And by the way, the next morning before any procedure was performed, the cancerous obstruction was passed. It turned out to be a piece of bowel movement. So, 3 medical mistakes, all based on a refusal to consider another diagnosis. It was as if they used the cancer diagnosis to make an excuse to do nothing, but they always wanted to make sure that we could get tested for cancer and for COVID positive. And not once in 2 months of Randy being hospitalized did anyone reach out to Florida cancer specialists for their notes, their tests, and diagnoses, especially the test that said there was no cancer. This is just plain negligence. We asked for a transfer to the Mayo Clinic to the liver department. SMH calls the oncology department, and the only documentation they send over is from 8 months ago. Again, they send nothing but the original diagnosis. Randy goes into sepsis, is admitted into the ICU. They call to admit me and tell me to change the resuscitation to DNR. Based on what? No answer. A week later, Randy has healed from the sepsis infection, and they call us again to change it to a DNR. Based on what? No answer. They also said that they tried to take him off the ventilator. And I find it interesting that that gentleman just had a wonderful experience with SMH because he was on a ventilator for several weeks. And after 3 days, they tried to push him off the ventilator, and they told me that he had been tried several times to take him off. And I find it was 1. I'm at 447 right now.
All right, 15 more seconds.
Yes, thank you. So in conclusion, Randy passes. I go in to get the medical records. There aren't even discharge documents. There are days missing of medical notes. And most of the notes are simply a copy and paste of the original diagnosis. So my question to you is, why was that diagnosis so deeply defended at the cost of a person's life? Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Posse, followed by Nancy Rosima.
Thank you, Michelle Posey. Thank you, Chair and board members and everyone in attendance today. I want to say something first. I believe that God moves and performs miracles daily, but he performs those miracles sometimes through those of you in lab coats. And I thank you and our community thanks you. I think there's 2 things that can be true at the same time. You all can be miracle workers, and we can think that we mishandled the COVID debacle. We can think both things. It doesn't make you wrong and it doesn't make me wrong. It makes us questioning, and we should do that together. While I trust all of you, here's what I don't trust. Bureaucracies and hospitals that are run by them, non-government organizations that dictate healthcare protocols, and science and health that doesn't allow you to question. First step in anything scientific is to question. Many said follow the science. Well, I followed the science, and it led to a $1 billion industry launched by corporate healthcare and big pharma that cut away from our precious relationship with physicians and patients. I miss that. My dad passed away from, he didn't pass from COVID-19. He passed from the mishandling of COVID-19, but his doctors were amazing. They were just doing what the NIH and CDC told them to do. And it wasn't here at Sarasota, it was in Illinois. So I want to tell everybody, this is going on across our nation. So we need to embrace each other and have a real conversation about it, not as enemies, but in a conversation. One of the things that struck me in dealing with my dad when he was in the hospital was not getting the right to choose treatment. A young lady, a doctor, was up here and she was describing in tears how she would have to intubate somebody, and she knew in her heart probably that that wasn't going to come out well. First of all, I'm sorry for that because you guys have been through a lot. But she said intubate and the rest is history. So I wonder, without the CDC and the NIH, with all of your brave minds, how many of you probably could have come up with a different way to treat that instead of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? That is the definition of insanity. And I believe some of you here in white coats would have probably handled that differently if you didn't have the barking orders of Godfather Fauci. Here's the thing that I want to bring home today. You need to perform an autopsy of what took place during the treatment of COVID patients, not because we dislike you, but because we're humanity and we got to get through this together. And we have to restore our community's faith in healthcare by never forbidding patients the right to try, especially if they're going to die anyway. Give them a fighting chance. And you can never forbid patients to have loved ones in the room with them. I'll tell you what, if you're ready to put on a mask and all that suit up to go in and treat my daddy, I'd be willing to do it too. Because I believe that if you lay hands on somebody, things change. I'd like to lay hands on you as a physician because you have to deal with this day in and day out. I don't know how you sustain other than through faith. God bless you. The last thing I want to say is that if you fear losing your, if we are okay with losing our freedoms over the fear of losing our lives, watch out because we're going to lose both. Thank you.
Excuse me, Nancy Rosamond, followed by Melissa Batanti, and I may have that name wrong.
Thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm a retired oral surgery assistant. I have been retired for a few years now. I did lose a loved one to COVID. My question is, do you all realize how much you have hurt your profession? My family doesn't trust the medical profession anymore. And I did have COVID, and my daughter had COVID. I did my own research, and I found a doctor in Ohio that would prescribe ivermectin. And we got it in the mail. And we treated ourselves because we didn't dare go to the hospital. I truly felt if we did, we would die. And I want to know if all of you realize how we all feel. And we don't trust the medical profession anymore. And I will not go to the hospital. I just won't. And she was a tough act to follow. And everything that young lady said is exactly how I feel. And I hope to God that you people listen. And I hope to God there is an investigation because there truly should be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll attempt to be Melissa Batanti and followed by Jim Collerton.
Good afternoon, board members and the public. Thank you for your service, doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals that are here today. Michelle Posey said it perfectly. I don't know what to say besides what she said, but I'm going to talk about something different actually. My name is Melissa McCondy, and I'm an RN married to a medical doctor. Bear with me as I speak to a few agenda items and set the stage to advance the agenda of medical freedom. I was absolutely surprised when I got my tax bill. I encourage everyone here to go home and look at your county tax bill. On the first page, line 3, you will find a tax charge labeled Sarasota County Hospital District. I was shocked to find out that this hospital system imposes a mandatory tax on all Sarasota County property owners. Now, I have lived in a lot of places in my adult life, everywhere from Jackson, Mississippi, Columbus, Ohio, Pittsburgh, LA, and Houston, and have never received a tax bill from a local hospital. I was even more shocked to find out that in 2021, SMH brought in almost $65 million in tax revenue. Wow! What do we get from paying this tax? Absolutely nothing. No discount on medical services. Now, when you read the propaganda on the SMH website for this tax, they throw out reasons like, well, this money allows us to have a NICU and pay for people that don't pay their medical bills. Well, guess what? If your child needs a NICU, you probably want to go to a facility that is busy enough to support a NICU and doesn't need tax subsidies to stay afloat. And although I support charity, I don't support a mandatory tax for charity. How is that fair to other hospitals who don't get the same benefit? I'm sure Lakewood Ranch Medical Center and Doctors Hospital would love to just levy a tax and bring in money to pay for the medical care that hasn't been paid by the patient. In fact, any business with debt would love to levy a tax to pay its debts. That is not how we operate in a free market. We pay taxes to the school board, but we don't get a bill when our kids go to school. We pay taxes to the police, but we don't get billed when we call the police for an emergency. We pay taxes to Sarasota Memorial, yet we still get a huge bill if we use their services. All hospital emergency rooms have to provide care for patients regardless of their ability to pay, but why is it SMH can tax us to pay their debts and places like Lakewood Ranch Medical Center and Doctors Hospital put their big boy pants on and make it work? Did you ever stop to wonder how SMH can afford to build all of these buildings that were just up on the screen with the most luxurious interiors and awarded CEO a $12 million contract? Are you okay with your tax money subsidizing the giant chandeliers at the new SMH location? Let me remind everyone of some things here as you pay hundreds and thousands of dollars in taxes to this hospital system. It was an SMH infectious disease doctor who advised the Sarasota County School Board to mandate masks for our kids who are now 1 to 2 years behind in math and reading. It was SMH who refused to allow family members to see their sick and dying COVID patients. It was SMH who pushed expensive things like ventilators and remdesivir into people that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin did no good. It was SMH who fired staff for refusing to take the experimental DNA altering COVID vaccine. Latest article from Washington Post shows that now it is vaccinated who are dying of COVID, not the unvaccinated. Kudos to those employees who chose to be fired rather than push a vaccine that wasn't proven. I'm sure you've all heard the outrageous reimbursement figures given to the hospitals for admission and treatment of COVID patients. Hospitals were financially incentivized by following protocols set up by Dr. Fauci and the NIH. A payment of up to $471,000 for admitting someone for COVID, an additional $39,000 for putting a patient on a ventilator, a 20% bonus for putting patients on remdesivir. These protocols were not the magic bullet and in many cases caused harm and even death. Doctors took an oath to first do no harm. Why did doctors go along with this? Because they were afraid of retaliation from the hospital and medical licensing boards. This is especially true for physicians directly employed by hospitals. Physicians should have autonomy and not be afraid to lose their job. In summary, COVID showed the public how the medical system really works. I'm calling on the board to investigate SMH's handling of COVID patients. I'm also calling for an investigation of SMH's use of employed physicians and its effect on referral patterns, loss of autonomy, and creating an unfair advantage to independent doctors. Finally, I call on the public to write your Florida state representatives like Tommy Gregory and tell them to go to Tallahassee and revoke SMH's authority to impose a tax on the residents of Sarasota County. But no politician will touch it because they want the donations too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I call for Jim Collerson, but I don't see him coming down. We'll move ahead. Abby Olson to be followed by David Patterson.
Abby, did you wave off? Did you wave off?
Yes. Okay. Followed by David Patterson. And followed by Dale or Deb Miller. Thank you. Followed by Dr. James Ekus, PhD. So, Ms. Patterson, go ahead.
Thank you very much, the board and the public. A little bit different from the rhetoric that we've heard recently. I didn't start out in healthcare, so I thought I'd give a little background of what drove me into healthcare. I served 6 years in the Marine Corps, straight out of college. This was happened during the Vietnam War, so some of the rhetoric that I keep on hearing today was some of the rhetoric that I heard while serving my country some years ago. What drove me into healthcare is I was home on leave from the Marine Corps and met my future wife. She had been diagnosed with cancer at the age of 16 and was given 3 months to live. We fell in love when we got married, and in the next 26 years of marriage, she had 62 hospitalizations, including 3 open heart surgeries, 8 hip replacements, and congestive heart failure at the age of 27. She passed away at the age of 45. I was at her bedside when she passed, taking care of her with home hospice myself. So I think my perspective on healthcare is a little bit different than most. My perspective has always been about patient care. And for me to sit up here after what we went through, and I would invite any public member to come walk in our shoes anytime they want. You are welcome to come to my unit and walk through what we see and what we do on a daily basis and see what we experience. You know, when COVID hit in September of last year, we were meeting as a leadership team on who could have surgery and who could wait for surgery. I would invite anybody to make those decisions on a regular basis because we had to make hard decisions on who we could have in our hospital at that point in time, whether it was a slow-growing cancer, whether it was a fast-growing cancer, was it something that we could postpone because we didn't have the beds and the capacity to take care of those patients. And yet we have people marching outside of the hospital picketing on our decisions that we were making. You know, everybody can be at the high part of the stadium looking down at the 20,000-foot view, but until you walk in our shoes, don't criticize us. We invite you to come in. We invite you to see what we do. We wouldn't be the organization we are today if it weren't for the things that we do on a daily basis. We talk about criticism of the hospital. We're one of the top performing cardiac surgery programs in the nation. We're in the top 2%. We're a magnet hospital. We require higher education for all of our employees. It's a place that we honor and we respect, and I invite everybody to participate in that at some point in time. And we're always open to criticism. We're always open to improvement, and you can come in anytime you want. You can call me and see what we have to show. Thank you.
I'm going to step out for a minute, but we are going to call Dr. James Ekas.
I'm Jim Ekas. I'm 80 years old. On March 2nd of this year, I was walking my bicycle across the Tamiami Trail when I was hit by a truck. As you know, the fatality rate for vehicle pedestrian encounters is pretty high. The ambulance crew got there quickly. They stopped the bleeding, scraped me off the pavement, and fortunately, they took me to Sarasota Memorial Hospital. The emergency room surgeon sewed my face back on. The spine surgeon repaired my broken vertebrae. I was in intensive care for 6 days and then spent 2 more weeks in the rehabilitation wing. Then I had at-home rehabilitation, and when I was well enough to leave home, I had several weeks of care at the outpatient rehab facility on Clark Road. All of this within the Sarasota Memorial Hospital system. Everybody that was involved in my care was kind and competent. From the doctors, the nurses, the technicians, the people that swept the floor. They were all well trained in their discipline, in their responsibilities. and they all give you the best of care. When you're old and fragile and feeble, as I was, there are a lot of safety concerns. A lot of things can go wrong and interrupt your recovery. From COVID through simply slip and fall. Everybody who cared for me was obviously conscious of these issues and well-trained in safety issues. The technicians knew their technology, they knew the equipment they were dealing with. The care was all the best. I'm just taking this opportunity to thank everybody who was involved in my care. And I didn't meet management, but I know management was there, and I want to thank them too, because I know that well-functioning systems don't happen by accident. Bottom line, I don't want to see anything changed at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I think you're all doing an excellent job.
Dr. Robert Salisbury, followed by Hal Munter.
My name is Dr. Robert Salisbury. I moved here in 1969 from the University of Pennsylvania to practice dentistry, where I opened my practice on St. Armand's Circle. I was blessed for many years with the opportunity to treat many fine citizens of Sarasota, including many members of our medical staff. I'm a little more familiar with COVID than I ever wanted to be, because I developed a severe reaction, basically a life-threatening reaction to my vaccine. I'm totally vaccinated and I've actually had COVID twice. I was able to stand here today because successfully being treated by Dr. Jerry Weinstein, who you heard from earlier today. He used medications that were FDA approved and inexpensive. And from what I've heard today and what I've heard other places, is that the restrictions that you've been placed under by Medicare, Medicaid, where you had lost your funding for using other things than what were dictated. If I had been admitted here, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. So I want you to, I'm very proud of the medical community. They're fantastic doctors. I've heard from a lot of them today, but they have to be allowed to practice medicine. I think the board needs to take into perspective that, the dictates that come down from government or whatever have to be challenged, especially with remdesivir and things like that, where you know the history. It's there. It's, well, science. We hear about follow the science. Well, if you follow the science, you wouldn't be giving that anymore. Thank your medical board and all our staff. They do their best, and I know that. But we need the staff of our hospital board to really stand up for the doctors and for the patients to let the doctors practice medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hal Munter, to be followed by Dr. Richard Epstein. Is Hal Munter in the auditorium? Going once, going twice. Hal Munter, Morning Dove Drive. Hearing no response, we'll move to the next one. Dr. Richard Epstein, to be followed by Mary Ann Summerall. Not seeing anybody. Dr. Richard Epstein, going once, twice. Not seeing someone. Marion Summerall, followed by, she's passing, thank you. Next, Mary Ann Molnar, followed by Lisa Hines. Okay, thank you. And what about Mary Ann Molnar, are you in? She's out. Moving on. Tina Sweeney, followed by Sherry Jura. Apologize if I mispronounced that. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have nothing prepared. I'm a nurse here at Sarasota Memorial, 30 years. 22 years here. Just want to say I'm very sorry for all of our losses that we had during this COVID pandemic. I look after 2 units here in the hospital. One became a COVID unit. The other one did not. It's an orthopedic unit. I think orthopedics is like having babies. New hips, new knees, you get to go home with something well and shiny. And in August of 21, we did not have that. Nobody could have new knees, new hips, new shoulders. We took care of lots of patients on both sides. We took care of your COVID patients, your family members, and we are nurses. We want to care for people. We care for the homeless folks that panhandle out here to the very wealthy folks that are here in our community. We are here to look after you. So during these times, I understand it's hard. It's hard to lose people you love. I lost people I love too. And I see the remnants of what that looks like, of a husband trying to get himself up. He's that lost his wife. We've seen and we've felt all of that. We feel your pain. And you know, this was a novel virus. When we know better, we will do better. In the meantime, we, our nurses, we took care of your family members. I promise you, we washed hairs, we washed bodies, we cleaned up after them when they couldn't. We brought them coffee sometimes, and never Starbucks. If anybody knows me, it's Dunkin' Donuts only. So, and we will continue to do that as a community hospital and as caregivers. So let's talk. Let's be really kind to each other, because really it's okay that we have differences of opinions, but let's talk and be nice about it and continue to take care of our community and each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry Fujura. Did I pronounce that right? Okay, Sherry, I'm gonna put her over here then. Sue Lerner, PhD, followed by Richard Stammer. Sue Lerner going once, twice, not hearing Sue. Richard Stammer to be followed by, I'm gonna miss this, Bud Kaplan, Dr. Bud Kaplan.
Thank you. My name is Richard Stammer. I'm a 20-year resident of Sarasota, and I have no association with Sarasota Memorial Hospital other than as a consumer. And I came here today originally just to share a few thoughts I had about Sarasota Memorial. But I have to also say that I've been very moved by the testimony that I've heard here today. There is so much heartbreak. There's so much grief. There's a degree of anger. And I respect all of that. I lost my wife, who was 59 years old in 2008. We were married 35 years. And I lost her to a recurrence of ovarian cancer. All of her medical care, for the most part, was provided here at Sarasota Memorial. And I must say that not once did I ever doubt the excellent care that she received here at Sarasota Memorial. I've known many, not many, but a few people who've had COVID who were also admitted to Sarasota Memorial. Fortunately, they came through on the other side and they're okay now. I just want to share that I have a lot of trust in Sarasota Memorial. It is my go-to hospital. I have trust that you will take the testimony you hear today as a board, both new and old members and the administration, and act on it appropriately and positively. And I also want to say, and one of my main concerns is Sarasota Memorial remaining a public hospital. I know that there are equity firms throughout Sarasota and Florida and this country that want to turn many different health systems into for-profit organizations. I've heard money mentioned today being used at the expense of patients' care. I strongly believe that a for-profit hospital, profit will be the #1 priority, and medical care will be far down from that. So I was very pleased to hear the endorsement of your chair that this will remain a public hospital. And I do feel we're all in this together. And the best way we can go forward with that is for Sarasota to remain a public hospital. Those are my honest feelings. I think now I'm going to go ahead and have a drink.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you for that vote. Dr. Bud Kaplan. Going once, going twice. We'll move on. Brenda Pastor Rick or Pastor Nick, followed by Melody McKeel.
Wow. I just came here to tell you about my husband, Monty. We were married for 56 years. I am the living proof that there are protocols that work. Monty's the dead proof of a protocol that didn't work. The story began in August 15th, 2021. Monty was admitted here because he'd taken a fall. Thankfully, there were no broken bones, but he had erratic heart rhythm. So he was kept overnight. And the hours for COVID had just come into play, 12 noon to 6 p.m. Therefore, I was not able to interact with doctors as he came in the morning. The doctors came in the morning before I got there and did his night rounds after I had to leave. Thank God Monty tested negative for COVID then. He was not put in that area of the hospital. But I found that it was very hard to get information, and they really were not treating him in any way. But they had a catheter inserted and wouldn't let him get out of bed because he had a fall. I'm not complaining about Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I love Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I had open heart surgery in 2018 by Dr. Hoffberger, sitting right there. So I know what a wonderful hospital Sarasota Memorial is. But things are broken here, and they need to get fixed. Protocols were not your fault. You had to follow them. But I went to Sarasota Memorial Healthcare after my husband's birthday on August 29th. We'd gone out to Siesta Key to celebrate his birthday, which we had done almost every year. But the red tide was bad. So when we got back, we both had little nasal congestion. So we went in to get checked because of COVID. I tested positive for COVID and was set up for Regeneron the next day. Monty tested negative, but we came home and obviously after a few days he was getting symptoms. My children had to take him back to urgent care. They didn't test him. He had some respiratory problems. He had heart problems. So did I. But they decided to take him to Sarasota Memorial. And he was taken here. He was given remdesivir. And he had a really long haul. What I want you to know is, like back in August, what I noticed was when you press a button to get a nurse, first, I guess you were understaffed, but people just didn't come. The guy in the room with him had called 3 times because it was cold. And finally, I just got up and went and covered him. These are simple things, guys. So something has to be done. Monty called me one day, and he just wanted cold water. I had to call the front desk for cold water. I love the attitude of the doctors and the nurses. I think we all have that Christian attitude towards people, but you have to know that there are things wrong in the hospital and just make them better. That's all we're asking. Just make them better. And remdesivir in the hospital did kill. I could give you many instances of people who stayed home. I took ivermectin. I took hydroxychloroquine. My husband didn't. That's all.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Melody McKeel, followed by Patty Myers.
When my husband came to this hospital, I thought he would be in the best care possible and the doctors would do all they could for him. I was mistaken. From the very beginning, there were reliable test results. He was put under a protocol that was known to kill vital organs. He specifically asked for medication that was known to heal the lungs and was flat out denied. He was lied to about what sickness he really had. They lied to us and told us he had to immediately be put on a ventilator when his O2 was in the 80s and he was still breathing fine and was able to talk. He said he did not want to be vented. They called me soon later and said that if we don't ventilate immediately, he will die. We had no choice but to believe them, and he was quickly vented, and we never talked to him again. When his health started to decline quickly, I searched and found a medication that was known and proven to help with no side effects. The doctor shut me down, and I was denied. I switched doctors and was denied again. I went to the infectious disease doctor so he could give permission to the doctor to administer this medication. It took him 3 days to call me back, and I was denied again. He told me that his hands were tied with this medication. My question is why? Why are doctors not allowed to save lives? Why are life-saving medications being withheld? Because I was considered to be getting hostile, trying to save my husband's life, a board meeting was called. And again, I begged for this life-saving medication that could save his life. I was finally allowed 3 doses, which started to improve his condition dramatically, which his records will show. So I asked to continue the medication and was denied again. Why? Why was he being denied again? Was it because the treatment I demanded was working? My husband soon then passed away, alone and around strangers. My question is, who is playing God in this hospital? Who has the right to say who lives and dies? Who has the right to deny life-saving medication that could save a life? This isn't even half the story of what happened to my husband and my family at this hospital. This hospital destroyed my life, and my two daughters' lives. There needs to be an investigation done. Any more lives are taken unnecessarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty Myers to be followed by Cynthia Schrock. Is Patty Myers here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, board. My name is Patty Myers. I'm the wife of 31 plus years. My husband and I have two nonprofits who help people with disabilities. We serve people. My husband died because of a hospital protocol, not COVID. He died of the treatment he was given. He was admitted with O2 of 94. And the doctor said, quote, I need to find a reason to keep him overnight. Well, it was remdesivir hours later. He only went for oxygen, that's it. He didn't even get oxygen for hours. That's a whole other story. Hospitals isolate. The worst thing you can do for any patient is to keep their loved ones away. It took me 5 days to get a call or report and finally to see my husband. It took me 5 more days to get ivermectin. They approved it. They kept saying it's not proven to work. It's not approved. And the pharmacy doesn't have it. They were all lies. He started this day 10 of his admission to ivermectin. They kept saying you need to be vented prior to that. Only when he was on high flow for about 40%. They said over and over again, this was the quote, we've done the protocol, there is nothing more we can do. He got ivermectin and within 12 hours, he could talk, he could sit up, he could eat, he shaved, his color was great. And then after 3 days of ivermectin, which no one gave credit for, and the doctor was probably fired for giving ivermectin, 3 days later, they said, you're going home in a day or two. He was down to 6 liters of oxygen. From 100% high flow, you're not going to make it, you're going to die, to 6 liters of oxygen. Then he had a shortness of breath episode. He had it every morning, and you had to talk him down. The anxiety of a patient that can't breathe, I don't understand it, but it has to be just horrible. As he did every morning. But the nurse, as he did the button, and he did the button, they stopped the ivermectin. They were hard and strong, and they said, we're not doing it anymore. After it worked, after he was healed, that's what he said. About 10 days later, he died after that. He saw body bags pass his room daily. One day he said, I've seen 5. Please tell them to close my blinds. RNs and doctors said there is nothing more we can do. Ivermectin worked dramatically. After 3 days on ivermectin, he was off. I said that already. And the high flow is only on 6 liters. I said that already. They pressured him to be vented from day 5. He was there for 27 days. They thought he wouldn't make it, and they treated him that way. In the end, he couldn't get ice, water, or food the last 5 days before he was vented. The government tells you what to prescribe, and they give you bonuses for that. My husband's bill was over $500,000, and the hospital received at least $100,000 on top of that. The ICU doctor told me, quote, I'm doing what the FDA, CDC, and what this hospital has told me to do. That's sick. We trust doctors to be doctors. I trusted doctors when I drove my husband to the death chamber. That's what I consider it. The doctors are threatened to lose their licenses, and pharmacists are too if they go against the protocol. Let doctors be doctors. They wouldn't even allow him high-dose IV vitamins. The majority of the staff were dismissive, and my husband, and they were discouraging. If you see organs failing early, why are you not treating that? All due respect, I have sat here today, and I have heard Harvard, I'm from MIT, etc., all your training.
Why can't you decide what's best for the patient? Do not follow your oath, and you're not you follow what the government says, or you will get your license removed. I challenge you to open this investigation and truly care about your patients. For all of you who have spouses, I want you to think about what you're going to do when your loved one is not able to work with your doctor and care team to try other FDA-approved treatments. Nobel Peace Prize meds that are proven to heal. In fact, after 3 days of my husband getting ivermectin, he texted my daughter, he said he's healed. The ICU doctor, after asking for ivermectin again, he told me, stay in my lane, I'm not a doctor. Be kind and compassionate, like that girl said earlier, that nurse. Be kind.
Ms. Myers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cynthia Strong, followed by Ann Vandersteel. Cynthia in the audience, coming forward. Going once on Cynthia. Yep. Cynthia coming forward. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you, Cynthia. Ms. Rock.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share today. I've given each of the board members a timeline of what my personal family went through in literally 4 weeks. I can't cover everything that we went through in 4 weeks. That was why I gave you the timeline. Literally goes date by date, starting on August the 10th. I'm only going to take a small portion of that. My husband was a 56-year-old male brought to Sarasota Memorial Hospital on August 24th, 2021, presenting with shortness of breath and pressure in the middle of his chest. He had tested positive for COVID 9 days prior. His death certificate states he died from COVID-19. After having his medical records reviewed just this past August, we believe this is false, and here's why. Page 1 on 824 from the notes from the medical records. Patient admits to chest pain and having palpitations. Another note, 824, has elevated troponin levels with non-specific T-wave changes in the EKG with no typical chest pain. How can a report say patient admits to chest pain and on the same page the report says no typical chest pain? I'm just here to ask questions. 824 laboratory studies. Other than the troponin level, the rest of his labs were unremarkable. His troponin level was 323, which directly from his medical records, they called it a critical result. Also from the records, a normal result is anything less than 60. As we all know, 323 is more than 60. Then 2 hours later, they take a second troponin just to confirm. From his records, rule in a heart attack if the 2-hour troponin was 20 points or more higher. His second troponin was 363. That's 40 points higher. He has other tests done, and every single test is higher. And everyone says, rule in a heart attack, rule in a heart attack. 824, a text from my husband. They are concerned about my heart. I don't know what is going on yet, but they didn't let me eat breakfast. I did get remdesivir, steroids, and antibiotics. The NIH has a recommendation done in May of 2020 that if a patient has COVID-19 and needs a heart procedure, then do it. There are precautions to take, but if the patient is deteriorating, then do it. Why would a place that calls itself a hospital ignore a heart attack and go straight to medications like remdesivir that deteriorate the organs? What if they had gone in and put a stent in and restored blood flow back to his heart? Would that have strengthened his lungs? Doctors always say the heart and lungs work together. This hospital had the opportunity to restore and strengthen my husband's heart, yet for some reason chose
or was told, forced, incentivized, or to go straight to COVID protocols over common sense. The cardiologist notes on 825, patient has an ejection fraction of 30%. A normal is 50%. Anything less is decline. 825, a text from my husband. Just spoke to the heart doctor. They're going to monitor me very close. He said, after I get COVID taken care of, they may want to do some more checking to see if there's still an issue. 825, the cardiologist. The patient was spoken to over the phone. I only found this out after my husband passed and I received his medical records. The cardiologist never saw my husband. He never had eyes on him. He saw his blood work, talked to him over the phone. Due to COVID precautions, how can a doctor assess something as serious as a heart attack over the phone? The cardiologist said my numbers are doing better, still struggling to breathe. Notice he was told by the cardiologist his numbers were better. I'm going to request 2 extra minutes, please.
I'll grant you 1 more minute.
Okay, thank you. The pulmonologist said his inflammatory markers are elevated, most notably his troponin sensitivity. He has a newly diagnosed ejection fraction of 25%. He has shortness of breath and his chest feels tight. Does going from 30 to 25 sound like his numbers are getting better? I believe the pulmonologist was waving a flag, a warning flag, saying this man's heart is what's hurting his lungs. Another nurse says, other than for elevated white blood cell count, which could be steroid related, patient does not have any pulmonary infectious symptoms. The patient does, though, have a severely reduced ejection fraction. The nurse practitioner, once again, is sounding the alarm, but because she's a nurse practitioner and not a cardiologist, she can't take care of the heart. During this whole COVID chaotic pandemic, the media kept hailing the nurses and doctors as heroes. The definition of a hero is one who shows great courage. I am having a really hard time hailing a cardiologist that speaks to my husband over the phone because he's afraid of a virus as a hero. I have a hard time hailing a hospital that held my husband like a prisoner for 22 days and never once allowed me to see him as a hero. I have a hard time understanding how I would call 2 to 4 times every day and ask to speak to a doctor, only to be rejected by the nurses saying the doctors don't speak to the family. That is not a hero. I have a hard time calling nurses and doctors heroes who on the morning his mom passed, he called me at 5:30. Honey, mom passed.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought she was giving me another minute.
We gave you another minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So thank you very much. And Vandersteel, followed by, it's either Michelle or Michaela Matthews. Matthew.
Thank you very much. My name is Ann Vandersteel. I am the co-chair of the Zelenko Freedom Foundation. Dr. Zelenko's legacy. I'm a journalist as well. I also host a show called the Zelenko Report. I'm a truth seeker and I'm also a COVID survivor. I'm a mom, most importantly. And I hear the words of everybody in this room and it breaks my heart because as a truth seeker, there is truth everywhere in this room. I believe that people who believe that they work and dedicate their lives here to save lives. I believe you took a Hippocratic oath as doctors and nurses to save lives. But I also believe in a hospital that is taxpayer funded has conflict when it comes to public service. Public service when public policy is being directed by unelected bureaucrats from the NIH, the CDC, that is driving protocols that is contrary to the actual efficacy of treating patients. Dr. Zelenko was the first to stand in the breach for humanity and recognize that hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc successfully treated early treatment, as well as people in advanced treatment, and treated COVID beautifully. Yet Dr. Fauci, when this was being recognized by President Trump back in March of 2020, as President Trump acknowledged a remote country doctor lauding the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine, Fauci bum rushed the podium and said, we need to study that in a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial. That was a lie because it had been done. in 2003 and approved efficacious for hydroxychloroquine. How did I know this? Because I was recovering from COVID during that day, and I immediately got on my phone and Googled hydroxychloroquine and studies and found it to be true. And I think to myself, how is it that nobody else knows this at this time? And I realized at that point he shined a very bright light into the bureaucracy and the public-private partnership, while it sounds so incredibly wonderful, has become the din of iniquity and pulled the wool over eyes of people who are very well educated that stopped using common sense and just kept following protocols blindly. We saw that happen a long time ago and it ended in gas chambers. Our hospitals don't need to be that. This is a very fine institution. I know it has an incredible reputation for a lot of incredible work, and I believe that that can continue. And the mission of the Zelenko Freedom Foundation is to change the conversation, to engage with medical professionals like yourself, with the community that's represented here, and find common ground where we can work together and solve these problems and look at things through a new light. It's time to change the paradigm from sick care to well care, change the conversation, make Florida the leader, and make it the example of what healthcare can be in this country. But we need to come together, we need to work together. And I know we have that possibility here because at the Zelenko Freedom Foundation, that is our charter, that is our mission. Dr. Zelenko believed in spreading the truth like a mantra. And what we've learned now through all the truth that is in this room is that there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of frustration, but we have opportunity to work together. And I applaud the work here of the board. I applaud the Moms for America organization, for which I'm also a member, in electing new board members that are looking to embrace ideas so that we can reflect in positive change, because there's no need in an organization such as Sarasota Memorial Hospital to be tarnished with people who have stories that we've heard here today. It doesn't need to be this way. There's fine representation of medical professionals in here, and I know they believe that, and it pains me to listen to the stories of everybody here. But Dr. Fauci, as you now know, was testifying behind closed doors. He couldn't recall a lot of information that happened during COVID, which I find astonishing. We cannot hold that as an example of a physician who has been marred by the decisions and the money that he made from COVID. We cannot let that stand anymore. When you find yourself unsure of yourself, you need to dig deep. Dr. Zelenko was a strong believer in our one true creator, our one God. We need to work together and find that God courage. As a co-chair for the Zelenko Freedom Foundation, I'd like to dedicate this book by Dr. Zelenko, How to Decapitate the Serpent. It's his journey through cancer and through COVID, what it's been like. I'd like to dedicate it right here and donate it to your library at Sarasota Memorial Hospital as our gift from the foundation. And I'd like to extend an open arm and hand and my name and phone number at 561-379-4353 to engage with anybody here in the room. And let's work together from a community perspective and the foundation to help deliver what we call healthcare for the future so that it benefits all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Michelle Matthews, Matthew. Michelle at the podium. Going once, going, is this Michelle?
Michaela.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michaela. Michaela. You have the floor.
Thank you. So, I've prepared some statements, but I just want to say thank you. I know it's a thankless job to serve on a board. I have served on boards in the past. This is certainly a difficult situation that we find ourselves in as a community and as elected board members and those that serve at the higher levels of this hospital system. I thank you to those brave individuals that stood up to stand up and put their names on the ballot to bring change to this board. We thank you, we honor you, and we're here with you. And we extend our hand to those existing board members to embrace the change that is needed in this hospital, to restore faith in this community, in this hospital, in healthcare, and as Ann said, in wellness care. I'm sorry, but an individual that spent 102 days in this hospital on a protocol is no recommendation or honor of a great model, a great system.
People are recovering in days. Dr. Sabine Hazen is stabilizing patients in 12 hours with oxygen sats below 70. Why is that not the standard of care in Sarasota Memorial Hospital? Why are we not asking those questions? Why are we not seeking that information out for those healthcare professionals that are putting that information out? They made their protocols available. Why were you not curious? Why were you not correcting course? Why were you continuing to administer a protocol that you observed had terrible outcomes? The mortality rate on itself. Why did you not seek out those in the state of Florida that published the ICON study before vaccines were on the scene? Why did you not review that? Why did you not look at what Henry Ford published about hydroxychloroquine again in 2020 before vaccines? Why did you embrace a policy that vaccination was the only way out of this? Why? Vaccination is not a vaccine. It doesn't prevent infection. We know that. It wasn't designed to do that. If you read the literature, you knew that. But who on this board reviewed the risk-benefit analysis of saying that everybody in this hospital, this medical professional staff, should get an intervention? Where is the risk-benefit analysis on taking an emergency use authorized product in ensuring that we actually have members of the healthcare professional to be here to take care of our community if something goes wrong with this product? Where is the risk-benefit analysis of this? I am so fortunate to not have had a member of my family endure these protocols. So we want answers. I want to know who determined the one-size-fits-all medical protocols for COVID? Who observed the clinical outcomes, the mortality? Who welcomed the dissenting voices of the staff members in this hospital? Or who silenced them? Who was reviewing the published literature? Was anybody collaborating with those who were first to publish? Was anybody asking Dr. George Fareed or Dr. Brian Tyson or Dr. Peter McCullough or Dr. Brownstein or Dr. Ira Bernstein or Dr. Chetty, Dr. Urso, Dr. Ben Marble, Dr. John Patel, or Dr. Zelenko? How were they keeping their patients out of a hospital and having very minimal mortality? Was anybody asking that question?
You have one.
Who made the decision to propagandize our community with "It's Our Shot" billboards? Who funded that? Where did that money come from? Who authorized that funding? Are you monitoring the mortality among our medical professionals within this hospital that you recommended that they take this emergency use authorized gene therapy product? Canada now has over 90 young dead doctors. Are we facing that in the future as well because of the decisions of this board and the lack of their risk-benefit analysis? I am gravely worried about the health of this community. There will be no amnesty. You failed. You interfered with the doctor-patient relationship. You abandoned your patient with no treatment. You denied patients food and water. Trained patients. Let doctors be doctors, and science always questions.
Thank you, ma'am.
You don't wait for the doctor going in phones and have you on sleep when people point out their hearts. Yeah, go.
Hey, sir, please. Order. It is past 5 o'clock. We published that the meeting would go to 5, but with the consent of the board, I would recommend that we continue to hear the public comment and continue with our agenda until such time that we have completed it. Do I have the consent of the board? Okay. Next, Deanna D. Paoli. I think it's Deanna Paoli. D. Paoli. followed by Joanne Werner. Yes, ma'am, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, board members and members of the public who are here. My name is Deanna DePaoli, and I am here as a member of the community and a health freedom advocate. In August of 2021, I was present when Dr. Gafanti appeared in his weakened state, having just admitted himself or caused himself to leave the hospital the day before under the blazing sun to speak to us about his appalling and atrocious mistreatment that he suffered here as a patient. And he has outlined all of that in further detail. And I'm also here because I have met some of the families who have spoken here today and lost loved ones to the corona death protocol, which is in effect here at SMH. I'm going to shift my comments into, we have heard from the healthcare professionals, the doctors, the nurses, the people who have put everything to deal through this crisis. And we understand that a lot of it was unknown at the time. But we've also heard from families, from patients themselves, and there is a discrepancy between the doctors saying that they're providing patient-focused care and what we have heard today from the families and from the patients. So there is one thing to come of all of this, and that is for the board, the new members, the existing members. We, the community of Sarasota, have given you a mandate to commence a special investigation. You have no legal liability. You're shielded from that. Your counsel, your board counsel can advise you of that. But we as a community mandate you to commence this investigation. And I suspect if the doctors of this hospital are allowed to offer their comments anonymously, some of what they have said today would shift a little bit. And we need transparency for the health of this community and for this hospital. We request and we mandate you to commence this special investigation. Thank you.
Joanne Werner. Did I get that right? Is she in the house? Going once, going twice. Robin Todd Williams, followed by Kate Wilson. Is Robin and Todd Williams in the house? Going once, going twice. Kate Wilson. Kate Wilson, going once, twice. Lisa, I may mess this up. Lisa Romlet lives on in Venice. Is coming down, to be followed by Dana Stevens.
My life has been saved on at least 3 occasions by doctors and hospitals. So I come here today with deep appreciation of the amazing resources the hospital brings to the community. That being said, this board is charged with making quality of care and patient safety top priorities. You have a huge responsibility, especially regarding COVID vaccines. These vaccines are not like any vaccine that has ever been authorized or approved before. They are so different that the very definition of vaccine was changed by the CDC to even allow them to be called a vaccine. These vaccines cause our own body cells to make viral spike protein analogs. In the name of expediency, many established trial safety protocols were not used with these COVID vaccines. For example, my understanding is that the most recent booster was not even tested on humans. That information wasn't even validated. There was no human test before it was authorized. It was just on 8 mice. So actually, oh, thank you.
Yeah, you almost have to hold it right in your mouth.
Okay, thanks. So I was just saying that the most recent booster, to my understanding, was not even tested on humans when the FDA evaluated it and authorized it. So you guys actually have a better sense if there's side effects than the FDA did. Because of this, our hospital has a very crucial role to play
in regards to patient safety. We must be vigilant for any sign that these vaccines are not safe or not effective, so we can provide patients with informed consent, and we can supply the FDA and the CDC with vital feedback by submitting both mandatory and voluntary adverse events reports to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. Never before has the FDA or the CDC needed to rely so heavily on safety data from hospitals to help watch for unexpected side effects of a vaccine. As board members, you can help advance your primary objective of making quality of care and patient safety top priorities by creating policies that any event that has the possibility of being vaccine related, including increased stillbirths, B-cell lymphoma and other cancers, sudden unexpected deaths, especially in younger demographics, rapid onset neuropathy, myocarditis, pericarditis, and atypical unusual clots be reported and investigated, including through the use of autopsies with appropriate consent. Policies should also be established to ensure open, honest communication by all personnel about observations that potentially impact patient safety, including having opportunities for anonymous safety and quality concern submissions to board members. And this would also apply to remdesivir. I'm hearing a lot of people say they had a lot of bad luck with it. Also, surveys of medical providers to identify any possible trend changes in event incidents or post-vaccination anomalies they're noticing in their patients. This information is urgently needed. Many healthcare providers are sounding the alarm bells of adverse events, including increased deaths and horrific disabling injuries that they are seeing in their vaccinated patients. And many studies are showing supporting mechanism of action for the link between the COVID vaccine and multiple adverse events. One of the many examples is a letter that was published this week, written to the editor-in-chief of the BMJ, one of the oldest medical journals. This letter was written by Dr. Angus Dalglish, appointed as Foundation Chair of Oncology at St. George's Medical School in London in 1991. He's very accomplished in this field and previously solved one of the big HIV infection mysteries by co-discovering that it used CD4 as a receptor. He writes that the link between the COVID vaccine and, I quote, clots, myocarditis, heart attacks, and strokes is now well accepted, as is the link with myelitis and neuropathy. He adds, quote, as a practicing oncologist, I am seeing people with stable disease rapidly progress after being forced to have a booster, usually so they can travel. Even with my own personal contacts, I'm seeing B-cell lymphoma, a B-cell-based disease after the boosters, end quote. His concern is so substantial that he is calling for a halt to the vaccines. Thank you very much for considering this information, and may you receive all the assistance you need, and may your curiosity, compassion, and courage be supported in your efforts to protect the children and adults in your care.
Thank you very much. We have one last speaker, Dana Stevens. She should get a, if it's a woman, should get a gold star for staying to the end. Dana Stevens, are you in the audience? Going once? Going twice? And she's not here, so that concludes the public comment. There are no other yellow cards for people who have signed up. I would like to return to the agenda. We have one item before other business, which we can use to discuss the matters that we have heard. Item number 13, legal matters. Ms. Kalish, do we have any legal matters to come before the board?
I have no.
No report. So we're now in other business. I would just want to say to the public and the citizens who have come here, and I don't want to sound like Bill Clinton, but I feel your pain. I heard heartbreaking stories. I heard our medical staff talking about the frustration that they dealt with, the nursing corps likewise, and it just really tears at your heart. And you know, on behalf of the hospital, you know, I would just say that those who have lost ones, our deepest sympathies. Our board has listened to you today, and I think that we will address these matters here shortly. But again, thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay and hear the conclusion of our meeting. But again, thank you as citizens for coming forward. And thank you for behaving. Amen. All right. Other business, item number 14. I would open it up to the board for comments, if we have the microphone back, on either what we've heard or where you would like to proceed. Or if there's other business to be brought.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move, as per Article 4, Section 4 of the Sarasota County Public Board bylaws. I gave Karen a copy of what I'm going to read. One for each member, one for the president, and one for council.
Can I just say one thing under other business? Normally, if we do have motions, that they need to be publicly, or the discussion on those be publicly noticed. But in the circumstances that we've heard today, I'm willing to allow this motion to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As for Article 4, Section 4 of the Sarasota County Public and Hospital Board bylaws, Special Committee, the chairman, with his concurrence and that of the board, shall appoint a special committee to investigate allegations detrimental to the image and the public perception of the hospital occurring during the period of April 2020 and continuing through the present, with special emphasis on the period of July 2021 through September 2021. These allegations involve, among other issues, the prudence of adhering to certain protocols for the treatment of COVID-19. The evidence of the seriousness of these allegations consists not only of contemporaneous videos and documents, including police reports, but the fact that the voters turned out 4 of the 5 hospital board members running for re-election. A more robust public relations campaign is not the answer. A comprehensive, transparent, and well-documented investigation to determine the facts is the answer. The committee will consist of board members serving as chairman, vice chairman, and as many other board members as wish to be members, and 2 members of the public, at least one of which shall have been a medical doctor, to be selected by the committee. In order to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, to include, but not limited to, employment law and the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, the committee shall be authorized to engage outside counsel.
That's in the form of a motion.
That's in the form of a motion.
And Patty seconds that motion. Discussion by board members or comments? Do we have enough microphones down there?
As I'm not an attorney, I need to refer to Carol Ann. Is this something that we can even do as a board? Is this something we can put together to even explore?
I think there are a lot of regulatory issues that are involved with a committee like this. Probably find a way to get there. I think prudence would suggest that you maybe undertake an evaluation through your normal channels of quality review prior to going to a special committee, but there are a lot of regulatory issues involved. I mean, employment and HIPAA being 2 fairly minor ones that we talked earlier about the Healthcare Quality Improvement Act. government in the sunshine issues, the relationship between the medical staff and the board and the agreement that you guys have with them through your bylaws and bylaws related documents. So there are a lot of regulatory and contractual issues that you would have to thread.
Great, thank you.
Brett, you have a comment?
I think we've certainly heard from the community today that these numerous testimonies deserve our time and attention. So I think to quote one of the things that was stated, let's take care of our community and each other. I think this is a good pathway by which to do that. And I think the three main bullets in our mission statement are quality, compassion, and innovation. And I think all of those things are certainly asking to be clarified and vetted right now. I am definitely a proponent of going through a quality committee. Today we became the board chair and we have new officers, and you have the decision to name the chair of the quality committee next month, I believe is the process. So in doing that, in some ways you follow some of these guidelines in that you have a new chairperson to lead that investigation. And while we're in that quality committee, which we are all automatically members of because all board members serve on all board committees, one of the things that I would really like that chairperson to explore is we cannot be the only community where these questions have come. So what sorts of best practices, what other routes have hospital boards, communities followed to answer these questions? So that's just a two-part comment. One, I would like to see, actually three. One, I would like to see a review of these issues that have been brought before us. Two, I would like to see it go through our quality committee. And three, once we get to the quality committee, I'd really like an assessment to be done about what's being done across the country to answer light questions before we go down a path, because due process and transparency are both very American values, but sometimes they can feel at odds with each other. And I think we need to honor both.
Thank you. Other comments from the board?
It's working. Okay. I agree with Brett. I think this is very important, and thank you for everybody that spoke today. I think quite a few of you have left. The one thing I would like to also have the quality committee do is not to limit. It clearly is not limiting, but I don't think there's a need to have a special emphasis on July through September. Yes, that was the delta, but I think we should look at the whole COVID process because clearly it went back many more months before that.
Other comments?
Yeah, if you notice, if you read it, it does say from, yeah. Yeah, okay, so you don't like the emphasis, but. Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other comments, we have a motion and a second.
Well, let me see if we have, do we have any other comments from any of the board members? Brad? Grab a microphone, please.
Well, and just Brad, you need to speak, but we can also explore an amendment to the motion as well. But go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, Brett, you couldn't have said it more particularly. You did a wonderful job. Thank you. And I too heard what everybody said, and it's very moving, obviously. And I too feel the pain and heard stories from people in the community. I was looking in the bylaws in section 4, and it basically says, I don't think it's a board. I just want to understand this because I'm a new board member. It doesn't say the board can create a committee. It says the chairman can appoint a committee. And so really all this, I believe what this is a recommendation to the chairman that he look at this and then make a decision. But it's not, as a board, can we create committees? Because the bylaws say only the chairman can. So I just want to,
put a little pressure on me, if you will.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. But is
Your
that?
reading is
Is that correct?
That is the board's.
Yeah.
Vic?
I don't want to.
I understand your point. That's the reason why I wrote the chairman, with his consent, shall. If you look at the words here. No, say it. But they have, I believe you have to concur to create it.
It's the prerogative of the chair.
I understand, that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
So I just.
So your reading is that the chairman can do it on his own volition?
I think it's the chair's prerogative with the concurrence of the board. It's not the board's prerogative, is what Brad is reading correctly.
Oh, yeah.
Special committees may be appointed by the chairman with the approval.
Right.
So we should.
Right. Right. That's why I said with his concurrence. Because if he doesn't do it, it doesn't go through. But as it happens, in all likelihood, it's not gonna, even if you don't have, without his concurrence, we don't have the votes.
Let me hear from the other board members. Sarah,
He does it, we have to concur. We do need a vote.
Sarah, do you have a comment that you want to make?
Oh, yeah, sure. Section 4, special committees. Special committees may be appointed by the chairman with approval of the board to undertake specific investigations and reports as circumstances may warrant. The special committee shall limit its activities to the performance of the task for which it was appointed, and upon completion shall stand discharged.
Other board member comments? Bridget, Patty?
I can just say from working in the ER, what I saw coming in and what I dealt with throughout the whole pandemic, and definitely, Britt, you said it, I mean, these people need to be heard, and we have a spotlight on us in Sarasota. We can be the change that everyone else needs in other healthcare systems, because this is when I have all my family's back in Chicago, and I have friends on all different floors. We have 19-year-olds now waiting for kidney transplants and dying, one from remdesivir, and then also vaccine reactions, and 5-year-olds dying from that. I mean, there definitely, there needs to be something done, and hopefully we can sort of filter through and come out on the other side.
Patty, do you have?
As a nurse advocate, I've heard a lot of families, as we heard today, but families that come to me and just asking for advice, and they're fearful. They're very fearful. It's out there, as you can still see. So it's still going on. So we need to make that bridge, like I said earlier, between us and the community.
I understand.
So however we can do that.
Sharon, any comment?
I'm just so sorry for anyone that has lost a loved one during COVID. I'm so sorry for anyone who has lost a loved one during COVID. My heart breaks for every single one of them. I'm overwhelmed. I could cry, so I'm not going to talk anymore.
Thank you. You know, we really haven't been faced with something like this, at least certainly in my tenure. I really would like to call on our medical staff, our medical director, Jim Fiorica, your thoughts on how we should look at this. What are your thoughts?
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I really do appreciate what everyone said out there, certainly.
Speaking of the microphone.
Yes, I appreciate being allowed to speak, and I appreciate what everyone has seen and described, because this has been probably the most difficult 2.5 years we've had in my history of Sarasota. One suggestion, though, that I'd like to make is I think we can accomplish what everyone is asking, and I think the way what Rick was recommending was allowing the quality committee of the board to take a first stab at this, because that is really the design of that committee, is to take the first stab at it, let them present the COVID data, let them present the process, and then bring it to the board. And I think that may make it easier than creating additional steps. And then you can decide where to go from there.
Since it's my prerogative, I'll just share. I think this is worthy of a review, and I think there are probably two components of it. One is the medical treatment of some of these cases, and with HIPAA and those kind of things, it's probably best to do that. And maybe we do have a recording of this meeting that maybe we take 5 of those cases, and in the quality committee have a presentation from our medical staff, the situation there. But I think that's one piece of it. The other piece that I've heard loud and clear is that we as a hospital, we as a board should do a after action review, a debrief on COVID-19. What did we do good? What did we do bad? What lessons did we learn? What things would we do different? And how can we be better prepared for a future pandemic? And so I would say that is probably where we would have a public meeting, where there would be a presentation on our COVID experience, both the pro and con from medical staff. And if we are not satisfied, and again, remember one of my pledges to allow everyone to have an opinion and their voice to be heard. If we're not satisfied, then perhaps we take the second step. I think I would be more comfortable having the process work and then come back. And if we need to do more, we dig in.
Trem, I was going to say that I really appreciate your comment on the fact that these people that talked and gave from their heart, and the individuals, of course, that have passed on, the thing that we can take forward from this is how can we improve to better, what, as you said, what lessons have we learned, so that if it's a pandemic or a hurricane or some event that stresses the hospital, how can we manage this the right way for the community? And that's what I heard, because it's important to look backwards, but looking forward is what the purpose of this really has to be.
May I suggest we lay the motion on the table and entertain another motion to refer this to the medical staff for a report and have them come back. So the quality committee and come back within. We have the holidays in front of us, say within 60 days. Is that something, Dr. Fiorica, that y'all could do? And maybe address primarily this issue of the medical care that we obviously have to do in a private session, but let's give thought to how we can review our response to COVID-19 and how we can move forward with that.
So they're going to get back to us on a structure and goals for the committee, what the purpose of the committee.
I think the purpose of the committee is, I think they should share with us their review of these medical, I know we have a number, and we do have a reporting, and say pick 3, 4, 5 case studies and examine that. And then, again, I think the review of COVID response should be in the public. I really do believe that for transparency reasons and for the public who has a great interest in this, that we should do that separate and apart from that and have that part of the board.
Trent, you can review it through the quality committee and then have a report to the full board.
Well, that's a great point too.
You could even have a special meeting with the board just for that.
Well, that's another good idea because obviously it's a very complicated case.
Trey, I just want to bring to your attention, there was one other case that we came across during our campaign.
Yeah.
That was one that should be included in those investigated. They did not speak here today. It was family of the ex-mayor of Northmore. Right?
Okay.
And specifically, we have videos, we have a lot of video footage of different widows.
Well, so you can,
but that particular case involved meetings with staff here at the hospital, some of whom have not been identified. And that particular case really needs investigation.
Yeah.
If board members feel strongly about a specific individual case, can they bring that forward to the doctor?
Yeah.
To you, David? What's the process?
Yes, and honestly, that happens all the time. I mean, people come to us and say, hey, I'll get a call or something, and as soon as we get that call, we have an investigation on every single one of those that we get. So I would suggest that if you have a specific case, so a patient, get us the whole page, the patient's name, date of birth helps, I'll tell you, and if you can get it kind of about the date that we can find, that helps too. And we'll put that in the queue and we'll do a complete review on that and we'll report that back after the call.
and I would encourage on, Dick, if you have stuff from the campaign trail that, came up that we shared out with Dr. Kirika and put that in.
Yeah, you have to do that. No, on the ones we have releases on.
Where you have releases for them.
Yeah, the ones I'll share with, some we don't have releases that we filmed it before we got the release, we never get them, they did change their mind. But we have releases on a number, I'm happy to share once we have releases.
So let me look at the board members. Do we have consensus? We're gonna lay Dick's motion onto the table. It can be brought back.
I realize I'm not supposed to speak.
Yeah, you're not supposed to talk. Thank you. Lay that on the motion and, based on our review and the review of COVID, if we need to proceed further, we'll bring it back off the table. Fair enough? Is that a consensus with the board?
I just don't understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, we have a motion on the floor, we need to deal with that. And we could call for a vote.
I didn't know what you meant by laying the motion. I think Trim is asking for a motion to put that motion on the table, and then if there's a motion to table, then you just vote on the motion to table. And what he's offering is go through the quality process, have the two reports, the one private report that would have patient identifiable information that was specific to the various cases that came up today, and then the ones from Mr. Rohde's films, and then have another report that would then be made public that's macro, that would not contain patient identifiable information, that would be about a review, protocols, the macro response to COVID. I think that's what we were saying.
Thank you. You said it well. I do have my Robert's rules of order here, but that would be the proper.
So I move we table Dick's motion. And we defer to you to just
Instruct the quality committee.
and have them get access with two reports, one specific, one obviously.
We have a motion on the, did Dick second that?
Yeah, I'll second that. I just want to make sure my understanding of Roberts is correct. That if for some reason you feel that because it's on the table, we can bring it up at a later time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Again, you have my pledge. I said earlier, I'm committed to hear all opinions, whether it's from us, staff, others.
And this process is a transparent process, at least the redacted version, without the specific.
Without the patient information.
Right, because of it and everything else.
Exactly.
The community will know.
Can't hear. I'm sorry.
This is a transparent process, so the community will benefit from, I said, the redacted version, because we can't put into the community specific patient names and date of birth, things like that. But the general information the community will have access to. As board members, we'll have access to everything. And every one of us in this room will be a member of that quality committee.
Every board member.
Every board member. All right. And do we have a second on Brad's motion? And there's no, debate or discussion on the movement to, put it on the table, so all those in favor say aye. Yes. Sorry, say yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Very good discussion. I really, this is probably one of the most moving board meetings I have sat in my 8 years. Again, I want to thank the public for staying with us. Thank you again for the citizens who came forward to speak. And if there is no other business, I entertain a motion to adjourn. I gotta go to the bathroom, please someone make that. All right, we stand adjourned.